of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Lisa, can you please read the Open Public Meetings Act announcement?
According to the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of this meeting has been given to the Daily Record. Notice has been posted in the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Drakestown Road, Mount Olive Township, New Jersey, and notices were sent to those requesting the same.
Roll call.
Mr. Perkins?
Here.
Mr. Mania?
Here.
Mr. Ferrante?
Here.
Mr. Nicastro?
Here.
Mr. Walsh?
Here.
Mrs. Laybow?
Here.
Mr. Roman?
Here. Okay, our first item up the agenda is going to be a wheelchair donation. Mr. Mania, would you be so kind?
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening. Just to give you an introduction as how this all came about, the donation of a wheelchair for a little Tidy. My pastor and chaplain of Council 6100, Father Joseph Orlandi, gave me a letter that he had received from someone located in Mount Olive. And I'll read it. Here is a request for help from one of our neighbors. Hi, my name is Elisa Van Dyne, and I live in Bud Lake section of Mount Olive. I have a daughter, Anastasia, with cerebral palsy. She can't walk and is in need of a new wheelchair. She has had the one she is using now since she was 2, and it does not fit her anymore. Anna is turning 7 in June. Also, the Mount Olive Transportation says it's not safe on the bus anymore because the wheels are very worn and not locking right. We just got her started for a new one, and it is expensive. The cost of the new chair is $2,911. We are asking if you can help us with a grant to help pay for it. Any amount that you could help us with would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for your time and consideration on this matter. Sincerely, Lisa Van Dyne. Well, after I heard this, I said the Knights of Columbus certainly have to become involved as I'm the Grand Knight. And we started our donation, and right after that, the Lions Club said we're going to donate too. And I have Pat. Where's Pat? Where you at, Pat? Come here. Pat was very instrumental in getting other organizations to donate. The fire companies, the Bud Lake First Aid Squad. So Pat, I really appreciate all your help. Thank you so much. Yes, you can say that. Well, thanks to Vox, they were able to give us the wheelchair at a discounted price of $2,437.25. And I want to thank the owner of Vox if he'd come up and I could present this check to him. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Discounted price. And thank you so much. Well, last but not least, I'd like to call up all the people for their kindness and generosity and their donations to make this happen. So, you all know who you are. Come on up, please. Mr. Perkins, you're a donor too. Anastasia, could you bring Anastasia up too? That's okay. As long as she's happy. That's all I got.
Alex, I just want to say something.
Please.
Goes. Larry, Brad, before everyone leaves.
Oh, please, wait.
I just wanted to add something really quickly. It's really a great honor. We had a very difficult week this week with everything that happened in Mount Olive, with all of the people pulling together under a horrific situation. Today we're on the opposite end of the spectrum, where everyone has pulled together to make something good happen. And really, it really shows that Mount Olive is a community that we can all be proud of. And I wanted to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for making this happen. It's really an incredible thing. Thank you.
Mr. Mania, Mr. Mayor, I'm sure I speak on behalf of the rest of the council when I not only thank you for your efforts, but the Knights of Columbus and how you were able to rally up, concerned residents to be able to pitch in like that. Again, this demonstrates not only the kindness of Mount Olive residents, but I think the kindness and humanity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, our first item up for discussion is going to be the solar array. Sean, I believe that's yours.
Sure. Just a brief update, and I had given you something late today on cost avoidance as well. As you know from prior meetings and correspondence, the County of Morris has gotten in touch with us with a proposition that we may be able to be the beneficiaries of a solar array in the back parking lot and perhaps beyond into the high school and also the library. I was able to work up some quick numbers if we were to get a parking array in the back lot here, as we really hope to, as one of the centerpieces of any solar project. In your backup, you'll see a memo from June 19th regarding the kilowatt hours saved and the actual cost that we would realize in energy spent in this building. If you look in your backup, I put down two charts. One was 100% supply from solar. It's just showing what we would pay normally under JCP&L rates, which is 11.9 cents per kilowatt hour. Under our current HES rates, now if council will recall, we already derive a benefit from being within the New Jersey SEM, which is a aggregated co-op or an energy purchaser. We pay 9.0908 cents per kilowatt hour. The solar array, if this was to come to fruition, would be a little over 6 cents a kilowatt hour. So if that was to be 100% supply, we would save in the order of about $34,000 a year on just our energy costs alone. Now, realizing solar is not 100% supply, we used about the industry standard, which is about a 60% supply. So if you look in the chart below that, I charged HES at 40% supply, solar at 60% supply, and as you can see, if this comes to fruition, we should save in the area of about $28,000 a year in energy costs. Over a combined cumulative period of 15 years, it's just under $500,000 in energy costs from solar. So that's a good thing. The second memo, which I provided a little bit later on this afternoon, I apologize for not having it ready last week, was to try to calculate a rough estimate on snowplow avoidance costs. Now, this is very difficult because winters vary from year to year. So we took the square footage, the average time it takes to plow a lot this size, and the average overtime rate. Again, every winter is different, but on average, we're fairly confident we could save between $1,000 and $1,500 a year on top of the solar costs of just avoided overtime costs in snow plowing and salt spreading. So it is exciting. We're hoping that the Gable Associates, who are doing the study on Mount Olive, do find our locations favorable. We are confident they will. We're a southern safe facing facility here. We have a lot of open space, and we're waiting to hear from Gable Associates, hopefully in the next 4 to 6 weeks, and where we go forward from there.
So within 4 to 6 weeks, we'll have at least an idea if we're going forward?
We should have an idea if our sites are acceptable. In the initial discussions I had with Gable Associates, we have everything that they're looking for. There's not much tree coverage here. We're southern facing. There's a lot of area up here. here in the library and also the high school. So we're hoping if those factors are fine, that they would move forward. Again, it's a $0 cost to the municipality. At the end of 15 years, we could buy the parking overhang, garage, and solar array for $1.
Mr. Perkins?
Thank you, Mr. President. Sean, I want to obviously thank you for following up. I know we started this off over the years. I've been a strong proponent of green and purchase power agreements. Unfortunately, when the price of the SRECs, which is the solar renewable energy credits, went from about $600 and some odd dollars a piece to about $120, the attractiveness of a private firm coming in and putting solar arrays around this building at no cost to the municipality diminished rather rapidly. By the grace of the Morris MUA, through the Morris County freeholders, we are now going to get what was originally only offered to schools, and they did not offer it in the parking lot array that we're looking for, to have the canopies, which, as you've heard from Sean, kind of serves a dual purpose. It gives everybody that went down to Benjamin Moore remembers when they had the solar arrays that were outside. So I think this is a great move. My understanding from speaking with Freeholder Chedwigan is we're definitely getting it. I'm sure that the analysis will be done, as Sean has pointed out. We're going to move forward, and again, I would like to thank this administration for taking the bull by the horns and moving forward in a positive fashion, not only to help save our planet if everybody believes that greenhouse gases really exist, but not necessarily that, but to show the rest of the municipality and the rest of the state that Mount Olive is progressive. Our mayor and our business administrator have embraced a green initiative, and it looks like we're going to get be able to save some energy. After 15 years, we get at least 60% of our energy for free. So, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Mr. Perkins, while I applaud the efforts of going solar, obviously you and I share a different reasoning why to go solar. One is, cost effectiveness, and not to, reduce on global warming. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Pardon me, Mr. President. That's why I kind of set that in there, that for those of us that don't believe in greenhouse gases.
Well, I believe in their existence. Last week when I had Mexican, I was.
And moving right along, Mr. President. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Seeing none. Okay, I'd like to add, I don't know if you have it all on your agenda, but I'd like to bring up the discussion about regarding ordinance number 24-2012, reducing the speed limit on Corey Road. I'm sure by now you've gotten the report from Sergeant Van Ness, and at this time, Sergeant Van Ness, if you wouldn't mind, if you could just give us a quick background and summation on what you found.
As you know, the residents of Corey Road spoke quite clearly that they're not happy with the speed that motorists travel down that roadway. While I do agree the speed is a problem there, especially in front of the high school area, the 25-mile-per-hour zone, we didn't find the same issues in the 35-mile-per-hour zone. But let me explain that before everybody reaches any conclusions. My report described what Corey Road is. It's a connector road. All of our developments on the south side of the township, the Flanders area, above on top of the mountain, empty out on or onto Flanders, Gregstown Road. And it was so it is a well-traveled, it is a busy road. We put the traffic counter out there from the Department of Public Works, and we counted an average of approximately 9,500 cars for 1 week. And that traffic counter also measured the speeds of the vehicles and the type of vehicles that use that roadway. Our observation is that the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit area by the high school is widely ignored. I ran radar there myself, and an unmarked police car, and the speed line was 35+ miles per hour. I feel like you do the 35-mile-per-hour area is, although there is a speeding issue there, it is more results of the traffic counter data support our observations that the 35-mile-per-hour speed limit area is generally observed. The average speed the counter provided, as well as some radar personally, was 36 miles per hour, with the 85th percentile traveling at 40 miles per hour. Although the average speed is at or about the speed limit, there is a significant amount of traffic that exceeds the speed limit outright. 74% of the vehicles that travel on Quarry Road travel between 30 and 40 miles per hour. 13.7% of the vehicles exceeded speed limit, or exceeded 40 miles per hour, sorry. 2.2% of the vehicles exceeded 45 miles per hour, and 10% drove below 30 miles per hour. For a different perspective, as far as counts are concerned, you understand, instead of percentages, out of 9,500 cars, 6,475 cars drove between 31 and 40 miles per hour. 1,247 exceeded 40 miles per hour. 187 exceeded 45 miles per hour. And then 1,377 drove below 30 miles per hour. Now, those below speeds might seem unrealistic to many driven on that road. That accounts for the driveway, side streets, people, the mailman, deliveries, anything, any kind of business that's done on that roadway helps account for some of those. And there are some who drive generally. The 85th percentile is generally the speed that police department engineers and so on, users, that data is generally used to develop a speed limit on a particular street. Now, other things need to be considered. Now, although our 85th percentile was 40 miles per hour, which is over the existing speed limit, we are surely not recommending that the speed limit go up. The 85th percentile is generally the speed that people are comfortable or feel safest driving. The road is a relatively smooth road. There is a grade to it. But we're only talking about from Schoolhouse Lane down to Flanders Drakestown Road. From Schoolhouse Lane to Flanders Necon Road, it's a hill, it's a steep, it seems like a steeper hill, although it's similar to the other side. It's a curve, it has a high school entrance and another intersection south of the road. The police department has reviewed this, and given the data available, we feel a reduction of the speed limit to 25 miles per hour on the entire length of Quarry Road will unlikely reduce the speed of the motorists that travel that roadway. Simply posting signs is not going to be enough. However, because of the walking routine of our students that go to school, high school, that leave the Victoria to Drive area, they cross the road at Quarry Road, walk the sidewalk to school, moving the existing 25 miles speed limit from halfway down to between Schoolhouse and Victoria to Victoria is more feasible. That is our report for this speed limit issue.
Scott, what time of day did you notice most of the traffic?
Most of the rush hours,
So in the morning,
in the morning and later in the evening.
and it
Or in
is,
the afternoons.
so it would be safe to say that most of the people traveling down that road are residents in that area, or just people cutting through?
The majority of the traffic that uses Quarry Road are residents. There is a contingent of commuters that do use the roadway, but it would be, in my opinion, it would be about 20% during rush hour.
And in the weekend, did you see the same number of activity as far as speed, during the weekend hours?
Speeds are very consistent throughout every single day, it's just the volume is different.
Okay. So obviously the volume decreases significantly on the weekends.
Volume decreases on the
Okay. Now, did, so if I hear you right, the police department does not recommend lowering the speed limit. And if this council were to lower that speed limit, it would be the department's, would they enforce it?
It would be our responsibility.
So you're talking potentially these numbers are in a week,
Yes, sir.
about 5,000 violators if people did not comply?
If we change the speed limit and we didn't comply?
No, if we lowered the speed limit and the motorists in that area did not comply, are we looking at potentially 5,000 violators?
Yes.
You already have that now.
You have more than that now.
You already have more than that now.
Yeah.
Mr. Maid?
The reason, I don't consider the speed between 35 and 40 a violation, because there's a variety of reasons why you have to understand. Every car is different, number one. Speedometers do not all read exact. Tire sizes, modifications of vehicles, sizes of vehicles, all that do make a difference on what a speedometer reads. And that's why you do not see strict enforcement under 5 miles an hour. So that's why I give you the range between 31 and 40. Just so that's we're clear on that.
So within that range, those people currently are not violating?
I would consider it not violent.
So even if we were to lower it down to 25, these people would be violating?
If we lowered it between, if we made it 25 miles per hour, about 80% of the vehicles traveling on the road would be violating the law.
Mr. Fronte?
Are there parts of what you're calling the new school zone? Are there parts that do not have sidewalks?
No, the sidewalk goes from Victoria to the high school.
Okay. And are there parts on Quarry Road, the full length? South side.
I'm sorry, it crosses the road. The sidewalk is not consistent on the roadway. It's
Okay.
up one side, crosses the road, it's up the other side.
Ms. Leyba?
Thank you. Sergeant Vanessa, on the weekends when school is in session, there's a considerably more traffic on the weekends and the evenings with families and students going to functions. And that when you did this test, that was not happening because it's the end of the school year?
There might be a count increase in cars, the number of cars that will actually use it realistically, but the behavior is consistent.
Mhm.
And we did have several days of students traveling.
And when the sporting events are taking place, you're going to have a lot of people from all different areas, not just local residents?
Most non-residents who arrive at the high school arrive from Lincoln Neck Road.
Mhm.
Have you had many complaints on this roadway in the past? You know, residents calling in, complaining about the excessive speed?
Nothing recent, other than the meeting 2 weeks ago. That was the first I've heard any recent complaints. Not to say that anyone didn't call dispatcher and say, they're speeding, please send a car out to enforcement. There have been times over the years that a resident or several residents will make a complaint about the speed on the roadway. It's very cyclical, and sometimes it seems as though we do get a handle on it, and we go and focus on another roadway, and Quarry Road spirals out of control once again. It's like a game of cat and mouse almost.
And during your traffic counts, what percentage are commercial vehicles, would you say?
I don't have that information.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions? So is it your recommendation, or is it the police department's recommendation not to lower it?
I can represent the police departments and my recommendation not to lower it from Victoria to later Straits.
Mr. Mayor?
I disagree with the police department on this, although I do generally yield to their expertise, and they certainly have more expertise than we do sitting up here in terms of traffic control, speeding, and the like. An issue has been identified in an area where there is a large number of students, and education is an important aspect in terms of what we're attempting to do here. One of the options that was presented was to actually install speed bumps. Could have kept the speed limit the same, but slowed cars through speed bumps, which I don't believe is a feasible alternative on this road for a number of different reasons. I think that the appropriate measure here, in light of the fact that we've identified a problem, is to reduce the speed limit to 25, irrespective of what the police department says, to have targeted enforcement. I believe the concept that we had spoken about, which is either a speed control device that allows the residents to know how fast they're going down the road, would certainly slow vehicles down on this road. I think the people who live on this road have spoken very clearly in terms of what they expect, and I think that we would be doing a disservice if we didn't lower the speed limit on the road.
Well, I mean, this all came about, you know, unfortunately with the tragic accident that happened with the school bus, which was not at all caused by speed whatsoever. So when, you know, I tend to disagree with you when we've identified a problem, and just on the data itself, it appears that we haven't identified, there is no problem. People apparently seem to be traveling the speed limit as posted. And, you know, somebody standing on a sidewalk with a car coming by at 27 miles an hour, I'm sure to them they're barreling down the street. You know, but I don't think there's been a overwhelming speeding issue on this roadway. Ms. Leibau?
Yes. A couple of years ago, when we had issues with the students parking on the side streets, Carlton and Teresa, Corey, because there wasn't enough parking spots on campus, and also with the regulations where, you know, the students, Scott will have to correct me if I'm wrong, it's 17 years old, they could have one passenger, and so that created an issue of more cars. We had several residents from the whole area coming, and one of the things that they complained about, besides the fact of the kids parking on the street and blocking their driveway and their mailboxes, was the excessive speed driving down the street. So I have heard repeatedly over the years, even after we made it no parking, I still hear from the residents, everybody, they go too fast, they go too fast, they go too fast. Whether they come and complain formally to the council, or whether they complain to the police department, or they complain to somebody that they see at an event. And I have heard it very numerous times over the years. My colleagues, we've all gone up there and tried driving 25 miles per hour, and everybody's saying, oh, that just seems really slow. It doesn't really seem slow to me, because out of respect for the people, I usually drive 25 miles on that street, because I've heard so many complaints about it, and this is the street they live on. If this is what's going to make them feel comfortable, I feel that we should, you know, reduce the speed limit to 25 and comply with their request. The other thing I wanted to say was what I'm really concerned about. My husband, my husband, my 22-year-old son and I, we went up there on Sunday, and we drove up and down the road. And my 22-year-old, he said, Mom, it wasn't that long ago I was in high school. He goes, you got to understand, you got new drivers coming up and down the street. They're going 35 miles going towards a high school, and then all of a sudden they hit 25 miles. They're probably going 45, and all of a sudden they got to slam on the brakes, and you got all this traffic. You got kids crossing the street, parents pulling out, new drivers pulling out. He goes, it just is, he goes, you know, Ma, kiss, keep it simple, and just make it a straight across the board, so nobody has to worry about, are they going 35, and when does it change to 25, and is it 30, then it changes to 25. It's going to be 35 if no students are present, and 25 if students are present. Just keep it across the board, 25. Nobody has an issue. If they have a problem driving slow down a residential street, then maybe they should try buying a house there and decide would they want people going 35 or 25. And I always support our officers. In this instance, I have to very respectfully disagree. I think we should keep it 25 and, you know, grant the wishes of the people who are living there.
Ms. Leba, if we were to reduce the speed limit on every road because high school students have just recently gotten their driving permit, I think all of Mount Olive Township would have to be one uniform speed, because there's so many roadways. I can think of River Road that, you know, changes speed.
Mr. Roman, the high school is not on every street
You're
in Mount
absolutely
Olive.
right, and
Or other
the high
schools.
school are
Or other schools. If it's a school, is there?
and the high school does most high school students do not walk down that road. You got, I don't know, 4,000, 5,000 students. They don't live in that street. So we're talking maybe at the most 20, you know, high school students. And so the statement that, you know, we should reduce it because, you know, one part of the roadway is one speed limit to the other, that happens not only throughout various roads in the township, but, you know, throughout the country. So it's going to happen. Yes, new drivers are going to have to learn. You've got to pay attention. You got to pay attention for the street signs. Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. Scott, Ms. Menes, I appreciate your report. I really do. And quite frankly, I agree with you. I'll give you some of the reasons why I agree and do not want this reduced. Alex, you've lived at least on Netcong Road for a while. Sergeant Van Ness, you can attest to the amount of times that the residents have complained for people exiting off of Route 46 onto Netcong Road on their way speedily down to Sandshore Road. Tremendous amount of traffic goes down that road during rush hour. That speed limit is, if I remember correctly, was reduced to 25?
No, 35.
35. There's probably nobody doing 35. I think your results would probably be close to what we are here. We've put enforcement up, we had the flashing signs, we had the radar sign, and then once that leaves, people are creatures of habit. To take the analogy of Mrs. LeBeau, which I was probably one of the few council members that didn't want to see all these no parkings all around the school, because what we did was we moved them from one street to another street to another street. And I don't want us to be doing, it's kind of when I sat back on the zoning board, it's like we're zoning by variance. We're almost looking at, when an issue pops up which had absolutely nothing to do with speed, we want to address that by reducing the speed. I think the safety measures that the police department presented to us 2 weeks ago with what their plan was to provide for a safer ingress and egress out of the high school for the students was adequate. I think anybody who drives toward a school, coming up past the middle school here, it says 25 when children are present. Well, that's really when you're concerned, is when the children are present. I know I'm concerned. We're all concerned when children are coming and going to school. That makes perfect sense. But I think during the course of the average day, that the 35-mile-per-hour speed limit, especially given the fact of your report, and I have to attest that, your report is true and factual, there doesn't appear to be an issue other than the fact that 35 miles an hour, if you're standing there with your children playing on the front lawn, seems like it's fast. I've been in front of Alex's house when people have come down at 35 miles an hour, and it sure seems like they're going fast. So I won't be in favor of reducing this. I think for all intents and purposes, I think we protect the students. The plan that the police department came up with, which I think would be feasible, keeping the speed limit around all of the schools at 25 miles per hour and leaving the rest of the township. Otherwise, then I think, as Alex has said, then we need to start going around each portion. We might also make every place 25 miles an hour. Put speed bumps on every single block. It's kind of ridiculous. Thank you, Mr. President.
Right, and also going back to the Sergeant Van Ness's report, who's to say that when residents were complaining about the speeding, that it was not the 2.2% that were exceeding the speed limit by 45? I think it would be bad policy to reduce the roadway on the street based on what may or may not be one or two vehicles out of 800, that exceed the speed limit. Ms. Leybow?
Actually, it's not just because of this incident with the school bus accident with the students. I personally believe that any residential street should be 25 miles per hour. I have talked about this for many, many years. I know some people think that's totally unrealistic, but when you have your children playing and you're on a residential street, I would just prefer to see everything at 25 miles per hour. And because this is an area where you have a lot of students and a lot of people coming from out of the area, I just think that keeping it simple and one speed limit across the board, it just makes more sense. And I do understand, I recognize that the accident that took place was not due to speed. However, residents have spoken up and they have requested this. This is where they live. This impacts them. A few months ago, we had a bunch of residents for Flanders Netcong Road. A lot of residents who do not live there wanted it open because it would be more convenient to have that road open, and it was requested that it be kept closed. Nobody wanted it as a cut-through. They were concerned about people speeding through, and these people are asking for the road to be closed. They're asking for a 10-mile-per-hour reduction. I don't think it's unrealistic.
Mr. Nicastro?
I had mixed feelings about this all week long, and I've been up there quite a few times trying to go 25 and understand the trying to go 25 is very, very difficult. But at the same time, I don't live on that street. The residents do. The residents came here, as the mayor mentioned and Ms. LeBeau, about the speed limit, which had nothing to do with the accident, I understand. Living on a street, you want to be safe, and you have kids. And again, if there's not a compromise, I mean, I had questioned whether we can go to 30 miles an hour, if that would just, we know how people drive. If it's 25, they do 30, 35 anyway. If they do 30, they do 35, 40. If we give them 35, they're going to do, as we see, 40, 45 through there. So, as much as I struggle with it saying, is it right, the residents live there. It's really not, for me, in my opinion. I'm not living there, so I would go along with a reduction in the speed limit, whether it's 25 or 30, whichever would make better sense. But I just feel it's what the residents want, and that's who I represent. So if they want that, that's what I would be in favor of.
I would just like to chime in that, and I would have a bone of contention with that's what the residents want, because last time I checked, I don't think we polled every single resident that lives in that neighborhood. The only ones that we heard from, are, like as always, are the vocal. And if memory serves me correct, was that 10, 15 people? I mean, I don't know how many people live in that neighborhood, live in that area that use Corey Road, but I would have to, just by looking at these numbers, it's got to be at least 200 to 300. So unless, we have everybody that, that lives in that area agreeing to, in a plurality, they want to see that street reduced to 25. And on top of that, we're going to definitely ask our police department to enforce it, because if we don't enforce it, just lowering it just so that we could feel good because we decided to lower down a speed limit for a neighborhood, then what are we going to do? If we start enforcing it, you think those residents in New York are going to be quite happy when they start receiving a ticket for going 32 miles an hour in their neighborhood? Mr. Perkins?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would just say, and I think all of us are concerned, and we all want to do what's right for the residents. And so we do hear a lot from vocal residents. There's residents that, God, they won't say anything bad. They will when you're at the store, but they don't say anything anywhere else. I think if we're going to look at this, and again, we kind of, when we talked about the flooding situations that we have when we went back through this in August and September, we talked about in the mayor with let's not do these things piecemeal. Let's do it throughout the municipality. So if we're going to, for the sake of 15 people, give or take, however many showed up, that said this is what we want, do we absolutely, as a legislative body, have to wait for the people to come and tell us that they want this? Or do we look back and say, Netcog Road, 35, drop it to 25. Every place, River Road, 35, drop it to 25, because they're all residential. Every single one of them is a residential street. So if we're going to look at Corey Road, which is quote-unquote a pass-through road at 35, then do we need to wait? Because once the newspapers, everybody else sees, well, the people came in for Corey Road and they said it was too fast and it was dangerous and the council reduced it to 25. 3 months from now, we're going to see another group of people here, and they're going to be from Netcong Road or from River Road or some other road that's 35 miles an hour. And are we going to keep getting ordinances passed in front of us that we're going to keep reducing the speed limits? So if we think that living here, I've been here 26 years, if we think that there's speeding issues on specific roadways, then let's do it across the board. Let's make them all 25 miles an hour. We're the legislative body, we can do that, and it's up to the police department administration to enforce it. Then everybody's safer by 10 miles per hour. Because I know you've heard complaints from people on Netcong Road. We've heard complaints from, what about Sandshore Road? We had a fatality there last year. Let's make that 25 all the way through there too. People, do we need to wait for things to happen before we do it? Let's do it all.
And
thank you, Mr. President.
And again, I caution this council on reducing the speed on that limit based on anecdotal evidence from people saying that they're speeding, because we have no idea whether that observation by residents were in the according to these numbers, the anywhere from the 2.2 to the 15% that may have been exceeding the speed limit, which should have gotten a ticket anyway. So, I also caution to jump onto Mr. Perkins' line of thought. If we're going to go and reduce the speed limit, because we are representatives, and I take that role not lightly. We are representatives. That means, yes, we do listen to the public, and we should also make our own judgment based on professionals. I tried driving down that road 25 miles an hour. I felt like I was stalking the neighborhood. I was waiting to see if residents in there were going to call that there was, some stalker, because I didn't look that.
Did you arrest him, Scott?
I wasn't dressed as I was, currently now, but it just did not feel right doing 25 miles an hour during that stretch. Yes, when you get near the high school, it feels more comfortable, and especially with the engineering things that we're going to be doing near that area, it will naturally reduce that area, which was a problem. Does anybody else have any other questions for Mr. Van Ness? Mike, you said you
I had one question for Sergeant. Looking at your report here, you're basically saying that you feel that by limiting the speed limit to 25 miles an hour is not going to necessarily make the drivers drive within that speed limit. What are some other drawbacks or negatives of limiting the speed limit to 25? I know the council president just mentioned that he didn't feel comfortable driving at that speed on that road. What are some other drawbacks of lowering it besides the fact that you don't think it's going to make people drive that speed?
There's no drawback in posting any limit anywhere. The issue is, one, enforceability.
Okay.
Two, residents aren't going to notice a difference in speed.
Doesn't work.
It's not that it's a drawback, it's just fallacies. There's no real positive to posting it unless you have the resources to put the policeman there all the time. It's not going to change much on what's going on there. People will drive as they are today. They're driving that road as they are. They feel the same as they drive on. So if you're comfortable driving 38 miles an hour, that's what they're doing. If you're comfortable driving slower, that's what they're doing. If they're comfortable driving faster, that's what they're doing. But there are some people who yes, intentionally go too fast. And those are the numbers are represented in that report. And that requires more enforcement on our part as well. We recognize that. And more enforcement is going to be part of the solution for us, from our point of view, that we do have to address that 3% of people that are exceeding the speed limit by.
Mr. Ferrante.
One thing that I'd like to stress is we need to remember that this is a road that has a school on it. And it doesn't matter if there's 5,000 kids that drive or 5 kids that walk. It shouldn't matter. It just takes one kid to get hit. I live in a development that has a grade school, that people walk to school, that doesn't have sidewalks, and people still speed, even though it's 25 miles an hour. I think we need to put the onus more on the police department to manage the speed limit, and I'd be in favor of dropping it to 25.
And Mr. Fry, if I may jump in on that, yes, it is near a high school. When school is in session, they will be in the school. They will not be walking down Corey Road. So they're not going to be exposed to the speed limit. And again, if we're going to lower this down to 25 and not require the police department to enforce it, then this is basically a feel-good measure to make us feel good, because as Sergeant Van Ness has testified, motorists are going to pretty much follow the 74% between 31 and 40. So this is basically, unless we're requiring now the police department to ticket, and I know I drove it, I don't know how many of us drove down 25 miles an hour or even 30. If we're gonna ask the police department to enforce something that we're going to be passing, I have to assume that we don't pass laws here just for the sake of passing them because it makes us feel good. We want, to be enforced. Then we should be prepared with what the consequences are going to be. And you're going to have a lot of angry residents mad at our police department because they drove 32 miles an hour in their neighborhood. And again, I caution you, yes, it was it was 10 to 20 people that we may have heard that said that there's a speeding issue. And we don't know if that was that 2%, and we haven't heard from everybody in that neighborhood. Mr. Walsh and Ms. Laybell.
Yes. First of all, Alex, I just teasing a little bit. I just, as president, that doesn't mean you have to comment on every single council person's opinion. But
I think
every time
I comment on everybody's opinion whether I was president or not. That's my nature.
Okay, but I do think I am for the 25. I think we do represent, as Joe was saying, that we represent the people. This is, in my opinion, what they want. Honestly, I feel like this is what they want all over town. I think we've got a lot of speeding problems all over the place. A lot of people have kids. They want people to slow down more. I'd be in favor of more speed bumps, and I will be voting for this, and I would probably vote for many other reductions in speed limits all over town. Thank you, sir.
Ms. Leyba and Mr. Mania?
I just want to say, in all fairness to the comments that Mr. Roman has made about that it was only a couple of residents, maybe 15, who came and mentioned the speed limit and requesting a reduction. If this does go forward on a first reading tonight as an introduction and with a second reading in 2 weeks, I would like to know if it's possible to send out a letter to all the houses in that neighborhood and just say, we're planning on reducing your speed limit. If you don't want it, come and let us know. And I think that they'll be very happy to have a reduction in speed. I almost went door to door this past weekend, and I decided I did not want to rile up a whole bunch of people and have them come here and yell at you, Alex, but
That's not a problem.
that could be arranged.
Mr. Mania?
I know we've emphasized that the 2 students that were injured was not attributed to speed, but if we don't act and something, God forbid, something should happen because of speed, I couldn't forgive myself.
Right, John.
So I'm in favor of the 25.
And God forbid something does happen and that speed was found to be at 50 miles an hour, this reduction in speed limit would have done nothing. You know, just like that accident that happened on Sand Shore, that gentleman was not going anywhere near the speed limit. The accident that happened last week, gentleman was not going anywhere near the speed limit. So, you know, yes, we don't want any one death, but, you know, most of the time when, you know, accidents happen, they're not going the speed that they're supposed to be going anyway. Mr. Perkins, and I think as long as nobody else has got anything new to add, we'll move on.
Thank you, Mr. President. My feeling is that the majority of the council is going to pass this, and that's good. You know, they should all feel really good. I just want, if we're going to canvass all them people, then let's start canvassing the rest of the municipality. Because I'm not going to sit up here and watch the same thing we did for the parking at the high school, where every time something happens, that we get 15 or so neighbors that come up here and complain, and then the council turns around and says, well, let's address it by a speed reduction, because we had people complaining about speed. We've had people complaining about speed for every year that I've sat up here, and we have not reduced it. They're reduced at schools for a specific reason. This is going to pass through. We might as well move on, Mr. President.
I agree. All right, seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Van Ness. Okay, we are on to resolutions. There are 11 resolutions. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Seeing none, we're on to ordinances. Okay, we're on to our first old business. Anyone? Mr. Perkins.
Yes, I'm trying to get back, Mr. President, to ordinances. On the ordinance amending section 400-95A of the code to permit seasonal sponsorship signs in the Township of Mount Olive Parks. The impetus for that is from...
Well, that actually started out of the baseball and football, and where they were trying to come up with ways to fundraise, to come up with more money for their organization. I'd like to at this time take the opportunity to have the Vice President of Softball, if he wants to make any comments regarding this.
Dave Jessica, 27 Jocinda Road. Starting to feel like a regular. So, as you're all aware, at one point the town, the rec department used to subsidize the various rec programs, and that subsidy diminished over time. When I was running a hockey organization, it actually dried up. And it's flipped over the other way now, to the point that for every registration that we have coming in, every kid that wants to play in any of the events, we're being charged a $10 fee to help supplement the town in their budget issues. So what we're trying to do is figure out a way to allow us to continue to generate funds. We've got very motivated members who are willing to go out to the local community obtain sponsorships, and get their name recognized as supporting the town organizations. Give us that ability so that we can put the money back into the fields, let us buy the windscreens, the infield mix, take some of the pressure off the town, Jim Lynch and Tim Quinn's organizations, and keep it tax neutral, but allow us to continue to meet the needs of the kids without having to continue raising the fees that they have to pay. So we've spoken a lot about the aesthetics of the signs, and it was funny when I mentioned to my daughter that I was coming down here to speak about them. She actually said, "Oh, I love those signs. They make it feel like a real baseball field." So we got to pay attention to it. They will be uniform in appearance. It's not going to look like, I know everybody's driven by Roxbury's Fields behind Home Depot, and it looks kind of haphazard. Uniform borders, uniform print. We want to allow the individual sponsors to have their logos, their colors, etc., visible on there. But we also know that we want our fields to look good. I don't know how many of you have gone down to the Jordan Fields, where the organizations themselves have spent a pretty significant amount of money through fundraising to put power down there, to hang windscreens. We've got sponsorship for scoreboards. The Blood Lake Fields have gone through the same thing. And it's all come from within the organizations. We want to be able to continue improving the appearance of our fields. And I'm sure I speak for the other organizations as well, with football, lacrosse, soccer. Give us the ability to help ourselves and, continue working with the town for that.
Ms. Leyba?
I know Mr. Lynch is here. I know in the past that he has said there was maybe an issue with the signs and our staff installing them and taking them down. How is that going to be addressed? And also, while Jim's coming up, one of the things I've said numerous times that Mr. Castro and I were talking about it also, with the scoreboards at all of the fields, if there was some way that we can get scoreboards where you actually have like a banner at the bottom and it's digital and it just keeps going, then we wouldn't have to worry. I understand that, but the thing is the money that could be put into that, if there was some way to do that, it would be, we don't have to worry about putting them up, taking them down, and it would be running through. Has anybody priced those out yet, Mr. Jessica? Yeah, because
I believe most of the signs have been donated, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, we've had corporate donations
okay
for those signs.
Because I just always think it would be, because people are always, the one thing people always look at is a scoreboard. And that for as far as advertising, that was people get the most for their money, because people are always looking at the scoreboard and it's easy to see. So I just wish there was some way we could do that, because that would be an effective way to thank our sponsors.
And so specific to the Dan Jordan signs, which we obtained just over the last couple of months, we went out to the sponsors and asked them for their donation. We leave those sponsorship signs up for 5 years out. So 5 years from now, we'll go out and we'll say, do you want to renew it? And if not, we'll go out and solicit somebody else to put their logos up there. So we will, but because that initial donation was pretty significant, we wanted to give them their name up there
for a long time. I understand, but it's good. I'm glad that you put a time limit on it also, because I know when we did the welcome to Mount Olive signs throughout the township many years ago, Mr. Perkins was on the Pride Committee at that point. It was a significant investment, and nobody really thought to put a time limit on it, so they're like forever. And it would be nice to be able to resell that space. So, and then Mr. Lynch, I just want to make sure. I'm only asking this question because it had come up in the past, and I just want to make sure it's not going to be an issue.
I think through some careful discussion, and Jill Dagnan was actually a part of it, we've worked to narrow the signs. We've tailored them. Earlier discussions in years past, there were larger signs. I think Mr. Jessica would agree. We've come to a resolution on the size, the typeset, the coloring, how they're to be affixed to the fence, and it's really boiled down to the associations have progressed in their mindset. The communication will be key, but a lot of the onus is on the associations more so than on the township this time. We will be communicating with the associations if there's a sign in disrepair, if there's a sign that we perceive to pose a hazard.
Okay.
When we're down there, my staff will be checking that. But we'll be working a lot more hand in hand to assure, there were some things I was worried about maintenance-wise, that the signs, if they're set too low, the mowers can hit them.
Right,
So
yeah.
we've worked through a lot of
Okay,
that,
good.
and it's been a give and take process over many years to
get to this point.
Right, because I just want to make sure, because last time we had spoken about it, you had talked about mowing and weed whacking, and you had also talked about something about on the top of the fence, the protective, the fence cap, and that you were concerned about that. So all of those issues have been resolved.
What it is, the scope of the size of each sign will fit, it will not impact the
Mhm.
fence cap, it will not impact
Great.
the bottom rail or the bottom wire in the fence.
Mhm.
And the associations have made a major investment in this
Mhm.
green. And obviously, since they've made that investment, the onus on protecting that investment
Mhm.
will be
Good.
incumbent upon them. So we've worked through a lot of
Mhm.
issues. I would love to say in the perfect world financially, we wouldn't have to go this route.
Right.
But however, in light of that, compromise is essential, and keeping it working forward with the sports participation.
Good. I just wanted to, not that I'm against it, because I think it's a good idea, a great way to, enforce our local businesses and the help that they give to all of our sporting organizations, but I just wanted to make sure that some of the issues that you had brought to our attention years ago were all resolved. So I'm very, very pleased and happy to find out that it's not going to be a problem. Thank you.
Unfortunately, it's taken quite a while to get here, but as Mr. Roman knows, it's been privy to the discussion. We've worked through a lot. It's taken a while, but I think it's been done very intelligently.
I think that's fantastic. This is what we want to see, is growth and forward movement, everybody working together. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and Mr. Perkins?
God bless the sporting organizations
Absolutely.
for stepping up to the plate.
Yep.
In times where we have cut and cut and cut, the sporting organizations have stepped up to not only maintain the sporting facilities in town, but now are improving our facilities. And Dave, I kind of agree with your daughter with respect to baseball alone. I think it makes it feel more like an actual baseball park, having the advertisements there. I applaud the efforts of the Recreation Advisory Committee, the Recreation Department, the sporting organizations in working together to come up with a plan that everyone could live with. I'm sure that there will be tweaks here and there in terms of getting it to the point where everyone is satisfied. And again, I applaud the efforts, and I hope that you're extremely successful in raising funds. And I know that ultimately those funds will be put back into improving the facilities that you use in the township park. So whatever the township can do to help you raise money to better our facilities, you can count on our office to back those efforts.
Mr. Perkins?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to, again, Mr. Jessica, great job. I know that Ms. Labow, we've talked about signs on the fields for years. And you guys finally getting it done, I think, was a yeoman's task to get this far, to get the sponsorships, to be able to assist the township the way that you're going through. I think technically, I would just ask the administration to look in, as well as the township attorney. Section 495A requires that the applicant obtain a permit for a sign from the building inspector. The building inspector doesn't issue sign permits. Under Section E in 400-95, all permits will be obtained from the zoning officer, which is the correct place. Under 400-95F, it says that the application will be made with the building inspector again. So I think we need to clarify that. I think we should get that changed in the ordinance. Also, do we need, as we have a definition for things like temporary signs, that talks about how long a temporary sign can be up, if we are now having an item called seasonal sponsorship signs, that should also be addressed in the ordinance, and what entails a seasonal sign, how long it can be up. I would just want to make sure that the sports associations, when they walk in to get their permit, you go to the right person, you get it done, and we can get this finished up, and you guys can get on your way. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. Jessica.
So first, the permits, are we talking they need to be renewed annually, or could it be a persistent permit for a given field to have X number of signs of Y and Z dimensions?
I think that's going to have to be, the attorney could probably do, we're going to have the definition of what a seasonal sponsored sign is. So it is, give an example, a temporary sign is good for 14 days. I don't know what the intent, I'm assuming the intent was to have the sign up for either the season and then take it back down. So I think that just needs to be defined in the ordinance so that you know how long the thing is supposed to be up. But I think you'd only be applying for the permit. I would hope you would apply for it at the one time. I'm not sure.
Mr. Mayor?
This shouldn't be a situation where someone is applying for a permit. The ordinance should reflect that the other sign ordinance is not applicable to this particular situation. There shouldn't be a fee that's assessed by the township. It should be something that's either approved by the rec department or the rec advisory committee. Either way is fine, but we should make it as easy as we can to allow for the signs to be put up so that the sporting organizations can get to raising the money that they can then use to benefit their programs. So if what Mr. Perkins is saying in terms of the other signs in town, which I do not believe is applicable to this situation, this particular ordinance should reflect the fact that there is a different procedure with respect to these signs, and simply approval through the rec department should be sufficient.
Mr. Perkins?
I tend to agree in part with the mayor. Then I would suggest that the town, that we scratch this ordinance, because the ordinance in its very first whereas says section 495A of the Code of the Township of Mount Olive prohibits any person from erecting, altering, relocating, or maintaining within the Township of Mount Olive any sign without first making application for and obtaining a sign permit from the building inspector. So if the idea is that this should fall under the rec department and not have to have a permit, then we don't need this ordinance here tonight, and then let's just get rid of it and let it go through the rec department.
Or just modify it.
Mike?
No, I agree with you. I think the issue that had come up was the fact that there's two ordinances on your books with regards to signs. One that's specific to parks, and then there's the one that you're referring to, Mr. Perkins, that is about signs everywhere. So I think when we were drafting these ordinances, or the amended ordinances, we were trying to be mindful of both of them, because our original reading of them was that they interplayed with each other. But I think what the concern that you're bringing up now, and what the mayor said about making this as easy as possible for the township residents, I agree with you. I think the only one that we really need to address then is the one about the parks itself, and we can have them, the process go through the rec department as you stated. So I would have no problem making those changes.
All right, so basically this ordinance would have to be scrapped.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. The mayor, let's make it as easy as we can. I don't know what you guys have to jump through a bunch of hoops.
Absolutely. Who needs more paperwork?
Don't jump to the hoops.
I can't even reach the.
Alex? Can I ask a question?
Yes, Ms. Labelle?
I just want to make sure, Mr. Jessica, did you need a first reading for this tonight for any specific reason, or 2 weeks from now we can?
I'm following process.
Okay. I mean, in other words, do you have a time?
That's what it is, to get the right ordinance.
Quite honestly, for this season, our rec season is done.
Right.
The travel seasons, I think we'll use the rest of the year to kind of line up our processes.
Okay.
Start, working on selling the idea. We talked about packages, the sponsor team, get a sign at half price, that type of stuff.
Okay, good. So
Figure it out
we won't,
next step.
right, so we won't hold you up if we come back with this in 2 weeks. Okay, good. I just want to make sure, just to,
All right, so
Thank you.
so basically tonight we won't take any action on 22 and 23, just pull them, and then for the next meeting have a new ordinance,
New ordinance.
drafted.
That sticks it all in the parks and
Right.
recreation.
Exactly, so yeah, so ignore the other one.
Okay, not a problem.
is that good?
All right, we're still on the old
Thanks.
business section.
I think you wanted to say something.
I'm sorry, Dave?
I just wanted to thank the mayor, Ms. Pittman, for helping us get this process started. Jill stepped up nicely, so it was a really nice example of council and various departments working together to try and move something. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, we're on to new business. Okay? All right, we're on to our first public portion. Does anyone from the public wish to be heard? Dave, I'm surprised you didn't have anything to say about the 25 limit time.
I'll do the rest of this.
Maybe Grassy, I live on Indian Spring Road, and I just want to comment on speed limit for Wolf Road.
On what, Amy? I didn't hear
I
you.
want to comment on the speed limit reduction for Wolf Road. I want everybody to keep in mind that it's usually the residents themselves that are doing the speeding, and not as much as, they want the reduction. This is the same scenario on River Road, when they were emphatic that they got it reduced down to 25. And I was probably the only resident who actually spoke up against it. But I followed those residents, and those residents were the worst culprits in the speeding on River Road. So I just want you all to keep that in mind when you're considering the reduction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is anyone else from the public?
Jay Toom, 84 Sand Shore. Question before I start. Your executive session, is that going to be on the cobblestone property?
There is no executive session.
Well, yeah, that's scrapped.
It's correct, okay. And I can comment on that now?
Yeah, you can comment.
Okay. First, let me begin by saying I appreciate everything that's been done as far as trying to clean up properties in the township, and I think the township, the administration, the council, need to be commended on that. That's an excellent move for the township, including cobblestone. What I do object to, and I don't feel would be appropriate, is repurposing that as low-income housing. To begin with, the roads can't handle the traffic. I've seen commercial vehicles that go in and they have to back out because they can't maneuver in. If the cars are parked on the road, another car can't get through. The visibility of going around the stone walls there is a hazard. The road's very narrow, and that a lot of the houses there do not have driveways, so that people park on the road. It could possibly attract questionable clientele. And what is that going to do? That's going to lower property values in the area. Lower property values, less taxes that are currently being paid. With all the development going on, developers and builders need to abide by code. Isn't that enough low-income housing for the town? Because there is quite a bit of development that's going on. Have alternatives been considered? I'm not even sure what the size of the property is, but can we make a park out? Is it big enough to make a ball field? How about just a parking lot for people who can't park their car on their property? That in and of itself, I think, would allow through traffic to go through unobstructed. So that's kind of where I'm coming from on that. I'm really not in favor of it making low-income housing.
Okay, Mr. Mayor?
Let me answer some of your questions, Dave. The entire town was scoured. We're in a situation where we have approximately $1.2 million in our Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which is subject to forfeiture if we don't ultimately move forward with affordable housing options that are available to us. Currently, the township is approximately at least 45 units short of where we need to be under current state law in terms of what we have to provide in Mount Olive. The first misnomer is that Homeless Solutions provides housing for homeless people. It's not the case. Homeless Solution provides very well done projects, and there will be an educational aspect to this process. If we go down to the bottom of Route 46 by the Hyundai car dealership and see a Homeless Solutions project, which fits very nicely into the neighborhood. You can go to Morris Plains and take a look at the development that they have there. Homeless Solutions, if they were called Affordable Housing Solutions, it's a better term for what they do than Homeless Solutions. Right now, if you look in Flanders, the horse farm that is Marveland is subject to development. There are 45 affordable housing units in that development. If you looked at what happened with respect to the senior development in Flanders, there were affordable housing units. In fact, every single piece of development which is done in town currently will have at least a share of affordable housing consistent with what that development itself
generates in terms of the affordable housing requirements that the town has to pick up. In other words, if you put in 200 houses, you gotta have 20% that's affordable housing. So every single piece of development, which there isn't much of at this point, because as you know, 80% of Mount Olive is in the Highlands. So we went about looking at all of the available properties that could be subject to redevelopment, that could be built upon, that weren't in the preservation zone. The planner and the planning department came up with Cobblestone as a prime location for this redevelopment. You're talking about 20 units or so. And I can tell you that it will be a first-class operation. Homeless Solutions actually owns and operates the facility. I don't know what kind of traffic generation. I can't answer that question. Certainly, that's something that would ultimately have to be addressed. I'm sure, as we sit here, every time that we look at a development matter, the developers always come and say, oh, you know what, it's not going to cause any additional traffic and it's not going to put any kids in your school system, which we obviously know is not true. Every time that you develop a piece of property. I don't know what Cobblestone could ultimately be developed as if someone were to develop the property. What we do know is that currently it is an eyesore. We all agree that it needs to be redeveloped in some fashion. And when we looked at it in terms of where we could commit the funds for affordable housing, it was the best option at this point in time, and that's why it was chosen.
Thank you very much, Dave.
Thank you.
Hi, John Montreal, 86 Central Road. I'm up to Dave's neighbor, so I live right in that area too. One of the things I want to know is, based on the selection of the property, it's not the size of the property that should determine and dictate if this is, this is the ideal location for it. You're talking about a dead-end street that has, I'm going to call it an illegal access to the property, and there's a driveway that somebody just started using years ago. That's not even an access road to that property. The actual access to the property is off the Stonewall Road, which has 6 houses on the road. It's a narrow street. Now you're talking about putting in a 20-unit, in a neighborhood with 6 houses on one street, 10 on another. You're doubling the size of the residents in that area. We're on well water over there. A lake's going to be an attraction. It's private property. You're going to have 20 units with families with X amount, 80 kids that are just going to want to come down and use the lake as their private, playground. I don't think because there's an acre of property that pops up that immediately should, jump out and say this is where we should put it. You have to look at where it is. It's in a neighborhood, a very small neighborhood, very small streets. Things like that. The number of cars, the water issues, things like that. Just you're going to over double the residents in that little section.
Oh, wait. Mr. President?
Are you done with your statement?
Oh, you done? Oh, okay.
Okay, Mr. Walsh?
And I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you were saying your name. What was your name? John?
Yes.
Oh, okay, I'm Pat. You had said 80 kids? Where did you get that number?
Well, I just said 20 units. I just throwing a number out.
Per unit? Okay. Are these 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom? How many bedrooms are in these?
There's
I'm
a
just
mix.
wanted to clarify.
There's a mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms in there. I don't know whether or not there are 3 bedrooms, but it's all subject to further development as we move forward.
The reason I bring it up, I'm not trying to be a pain or anything, I just, let's not get carried away with what we're thinking. I know people sometimes panic a little bit, and I heard Dave say, questionable clientele. I mean, these are folks who just don't make a whole lot of money. I don't think, so I just really, I don't know. I personally think sometimes people get almost like Chicken Little, if you will, with this kind of stuff, so just, I don't think it's as bad as people are trying to say.
As with Habitat Humanity come up, I've worked on numerous builds in Morris County.
Right.
You could put up 4 or 5 nice Habitat Humanity houses, all you have to put them up.
Mhm.
But why a 20-unit tract? That's my main objection with the size of the unit tract.
I hear you.
A lot
Okay.
of the same objections were brought up with respect to the property that was done in Washington Township, which is right on the border of Mount Olive. If you go down, it's right behind kind of the 100.
Mine Hill Road.
I'm sorry?
Mine Hill Road, Rob.
Mine Hill Road, yeah, so make a right, take a look at those units over there. And everyone's gonna have the ability to be involved in the process as this goes forward. Homeless Solutions will reach out and will tailor the community to minimize the impact that occurs. But all of the same issues in terms of traffic, it's too much for that particular lot. And I can tell you that after it went in,
no complaints that I've heard of from anybody. And again, as we sat down with Homeless Solutions, I said, you should really change your name, because it's not, that is a misnomer. It is not homeless people that are gonna be housed there. It's people who make $50,000, $60,000 a year and can't otherwise afford to purchase a home. I don't know what the limit is, but there are people who are wage earners, they're family members. It's on-site management by Homeless Solutions. So if you look at any of their facilities, they are clean, they are well-run, they're not homeless people. It looks like a K-Hub development, and I understand there's little that I can do in terms of minimizing the impact that's going to occur, and I don't know what that impact is at this point. It needs further discussion. But the bottom line is that the township has an obligation to provide, as I said, at least 45 additional units. And we are struggling to find locations because we don't have property in Mount Olive that can otherwise be developed. When we looked at this property, we all agreed that it was a property which was in need of something. Whether or not you believe that it was, as Dave stood up and said, whether you believe it's this development or something else, something has to happen there because it's just going to deteriorate further and it's going to become a problem from a property management perspective. And what I suggest you do is you contact Homeless Solutions. You can get the information from Sean during the week. He will give you the contact information, and they will be able to give you all of the information that you would require to better educate yourself. We sitting up here are obviously not the experts in terms of the questions that you're asking. We do the best that we can. We gather as much information as we can. But perhaps if you speak to them, maybe some of your concerns will be quelled, or you'll be able to come back to us and say, okay, I spoke to Homeless Solutions, and this is what they told me, and these are what my concerns are, and maybe you haven't thought about this, and I think that's a good way to go.
I haven't been down to the other development you're talking about, but how close to the Hyundai dealer? You know, I know that turn when you get in there, what is it?
It's right there.
It's right.
Now, that's a little bit more conducive when you talk about the size of a small hotel or an apartment complex, that, you know, you're more in a commercial zone, or you're talking about the middle of a neighborhood, putting up an apartment complex.
Not to the people who live down on Old Mine Road, or what is it, Mine Hill?
It's Mine Hill Road. It's the Hyundai dealer's on, I'm sorry, Rob, the Hyundai dealer's on the highway, but it's the residential road that the Homeless Solutions built the buildings.
Parallel to 46.
If you heard, I lived through it. There was a lot of pressure on behalf of the Township of Mount Olive to get involved with and oppose Homeless Solutions building that project down in Washington Township, because actually Mine Hill Road splits in part between Washington Township and Mount Olive. Since it's been built, I can tell you that, I don't know if anyone up here has heard any complaints.
No
at all.
complaints. It's absolutely gorgeous, too.
So I understand your concerns, and I certainly will take them into consideration as we move forward. Let's educate ourselves, get in touch with Homeless Solutions, ask them to send what it is that they're proposing, and let's see where we are at the next meeting.
Okay, and that's a fair assessment, but it seems like from, whether it's the media or whatever, that you're trying to kind of rush this project through,
We
lose some funding.
$1.2 million and the inability, yes.
So, although I will talk to them, I will look at the development, but on the same note, you know, don't just shove this down our throats because you got a deadline.
I don't shove anything down anyone's throats. I make decisions based upon all of the information which I have available to me. I've looked at it in pretty good detail, and based upon that and what we've heard from other people, this seemed to be the way to go. So I suggest you get the information, come back and talk to us. Ultimately, at the end of the day, if we're committed down this path, we don't have any choice at this point. The choice is, we do have a choice. We do have a choice. The choice is to move forward with this project or forfeit the $1.2 million and try and figure out where we're going to put the 45 houses and how we're going to raise the money to do it. Those are our choices. And if you come back and you absolutely convince me that this is the wrong project for the wrong place and we should forfeit the $1.2 million, I'm not going to put it there.
Ms. Laybell and Mr.
Yeah.
Perkins?
John, I just want to say, at the location now, when I go by there, there's a lot of ambulances. Do you know what? I see them coming and going all the time. What are they there for?
I think it's just whoever owns that
They just rent out, because when I was by there one time, there's like 8 ambulances parked there. They just store them there, so they come in and out. And also, being that I live right down the street from there also, when it was a facility for people, like it was like a halfway house, like a, yeah, it was, they had about a dozen residents there, and as you know, they'd walk up and down the street all the time.
No cars, and
no cars.
about a dozen at a time, and we used to even take them to church.
Right.
You know, taking a mass on Sundays.
Mhm. But the point is when we talk about a well, it was a nursing home, and so they did use a considerable amount of water. I don't think they had a water issue, so hopefully that won't be a problem. But also,
Well, you weren't talking about 12 families, you're talking about 12 individuals.
I know a lot of times with the people who will qualify to rent the apartments, it's usually has been historically, you're talking about nurses, doctors, interns, students, teachers, young, people starting out in their profession making about $20,000 a year. You're not talking about large families with a lot of kids. That's been the studies over the years of the occupants of the apartments in this case, and that Homeless Solutions will be able to give you. Well,
There are limits in terms of who can occupy the
Yep.
space, how many people can be in a one-bedroom, how many people can be in a two-bedroom. Again, we're committed down this path to the extent that we're either gonna go this route or we're gonna abandon the funds. So I'm not jamming anything down your throat, I'm just telling you that come back next week after you've spoken to Homeless Solutions and convince the council as to why we need to abandon the money, and we'll listen to what you have to say.
And John, I just also want to state that the administration and Mr. Greenbaum and our planning department, they've been looking at this for about 6 or 7 months now. So while it might seem like all of a sudden we're jamming it down people's throats because we just got to the point where we got our ducks in a row and figured out what we could do, and then we're taking the next step. But this has been going on for months and months and months.
I said through the first session, we talked about, writing letters to the residents about the speed, Maybe I'm not as informed as I should be in the town, but, you think the residents are going to be immediately affected in the area?
Oh, no, everybody will be notified. It's No, everybody will be notified when it comes to that point. We're just not to that point yet.
It's not quite that easy in this situation because there's a negotiation process which is involved, which is done through executive session, and it wasn't until we committed to the plan that it became public.
Yeah.
And part of...
It really seemed like there was a deadline out there at the end of the month.
There's a deadline of July 17th is what the deadline is from the state of New Jersey.
More like June 30th is what was published.
They extended it.
Well, that was what was the paper, so it was June 30th, you had to make a decision, it was pretty quick.
Well, we've already made the decision, like I said, doesn't mean we can't abandon the $1.2 million.
And I have no issue with the eminent domain,
It's,
no problem.
well, we didn't want to go that route. We didn't want to go that route. We wanted to purchase the property from the property owner. We had a meeting with the property owner. She was interested in selling us the property. We extended the appraisal to her, and she never got back to us. So now we're left with the situation of we needed to take action to protect the $1.2 million. You have to recognize the fact that if we don't move forward with using the $1.2 million, that money has to be raised through general taxation ultimately to afford the affordable housing. So you're looking at a tax increase to the average homeowner of approximately 1.2, it's $300,000 per tax point. So maybe $90 to the average taxpayer who's paying $300,000 a year, whose house is assessed at $300,000 to make up for the loss in the $1.2 million. And if we need 45 units, now you're looking at an increase of a couple $100 per household to make up for what we ultimately have to spend to provide for the affordable housing.
What about some of the developments like the Morris Chase development that's going to the top of
When those, yes, every development that's come in, you have to understand that some of these developments, Morris Chase in particular, was approved in 1989, and there was no affordable housing component, co-op component at the time that was approved. So as they get built, it creates a greater obligation on behalf of the township because They didn't participate, it wasn't part of the approval process, and yet the laws changed, and we can't force them to now participate to provide affordable housing. But the township still has the obligation to provide affordable housing related to those units being built currently. So it puts us behind, actually Morris Chase puts us behind the 8 ball, as compared to Marble Land Farms, which was approved after our fair share growth was put into place, and we can deal with that development on site in terms of what the affordable housing component is. So we say, okay, you're entitled to 220 units as a density on that property. 180 you can build as market rate units, but you have to make up for the affordable housing component that your development actually contributes to the township. And we have been doing that consistently. In fact, we changed the law to require in Mount Olive that if you're building a subdivision, you need to be able to satisfy the affordable housing option on site that occurs as a result of your building. But notwithstanding that, we are behind the 8 ball at this point, and that's why it's extremely detrimental to us to give up the $1.2 million. And that's, you know, why we went down this path, because it would be a problem for Mount Olive if we lost the $1.2 million ultimately. But as I said, if this is absolutely the wrong place to put it, and we've committed down this path, then there is no other option but to abandon the 1.2 and look someplace else. I just don't know where it is. I'm happy to work with everybody, but I can tell you that no matter where you put it, someone's going to be opposed to it. Just like my neighborhood, leaving the issue aside, when they put the lights in Flanders Park, my neighborhood came out strong against the lights in Flanders Park. No one wanted it there. Everyone else in town said, sure, it sounds like a great idea. They put the lights in at Flanders Park, and I don't, you know what, I've heard 1 or 2 people complain about it, but in general, it's a non-issue. And I really honestly believe that at the end of the day, it will be improvement to your neighborhood. I believe that there will be some increased traffic flow out of that neighborhood. I don't think it will be terrible. I think it will be.
Are there any plans available to,
Speak to Homeless Solutions. You tell them, you speak to Homeless Solutions. You tell them that the mayor suggested that they call, and you want to see what kind of plan that they.
Do they have a site development?
Yes.
It's not formalized, but they can give you what they're thinking at this point. And yes, and if they don't give it to you, then you say, listen, the mayor suggested that the mayor has asked that you give it to me, and if you don't give it to me, then the mayor is going to call you directly and you give me a call. Get you whatever you want. And Homeless Solutions is going to come out to the neighborhood and actually speak to everybody, let you know exactly what they're looking to do, and take input in terms of architectural to make sure that it fits into the character of the neighborhood and to minimize any impact that it has on the neighborhood. And in terms of the residents that are going to come in there, I really have no qualms whatsoever in terms of the quality of the people that will come in there based upon their other developments. And I suggest that you get a list of the developments that they've done in Morris County and go take a look at them. I think you're going to be quite surprised.
Mr. Perkins, I don't know if you forgot what your comment was.
Sorry.
John, just a couple things. If you decide that you want to go look at the ones down in Hackettstown, you know about it, go to the traffic light right after the Hyundai, make a right. Just before the entering Mount Olive Township sign, there's a small street on the right-hand side. It goes back, and there's those metal storage units that are back there, look like warehouses. They're just right next to there. All right, they're kind of like right on the corner. Can't miss them. I've worked with Homeless Solutions for many years, so
Kind of what point exactly, though? Right next to storage facility and Hyundai dealership, but not.
No, it's.
well, they're not next
it's
to
on
the Hyundai
residential
dealer.
side.
They're actually back behind it. But I'll tell you, it's a residential site. John, I understand. But again, you get a chance to look at what they do. I'm working on a few other projects with them that they're doing in Morristown. All right, you know, so, and again, the name Homeless Solutions, it just is what it is. It's sad that over the years we've had our planner present to us what our affordable housing obligation was, and it's not like these 45 units were just all of a sudden magically popped up. This administration has taken, the bull by the horns and said, we need to meet something, and you probably wouldn't be hearing about it right now if it wasn't for the fact that the state has turned around and said, if you don't spend the money that you've taken from the developers under the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which was a COA obligation, then the state is going to take it back. Now, we've all heard whether we like our governor or we don't like our governor, we've lost money from our gross receipts and franchise taxes, which there's now an Assembly and a Senate bill pending that hopefully will come out of committee that will force the state to let us keep all of the gross receipts and franchise instead of the state taking it and giving us a little bit that they feel is correct. They've raped the pension funds, as you know. They have raped the Clean Energy Fund to the tune of about $400 or $500 million over the past few years. We are in jeopardy of losing money that was put aside from developers to meet an obligation that was forced upon us by COA, who now is telling us if you don't spend it by X date, we're going to take the money back from you. It was never theirs to begin with, but they're going to take it back. So this administration was faced with the awesome task of, in a few months, being able to go back over those redevelopment type properties that could become available and pick what they think is probably the best option. I don't live that far away. I'm on Fern Avenue. I'm not far. I'm not sure how the plan would pan out. I haven't talked to the folks at Homeless Solutions. We're on a moving forward going basis. The plans will be presented. You'll have, plenty of time to go before the planning board to look at what the plans are going to be, to make comments, to get some sort of reassurance. But again, as the mayor said, if you want to look at a place that they've done to get some indication, they build phenomenal places. When they build them from brand new, they're phenomenal. They're all energy efficient. They're green certified. I mean, these are buildings you and I would probably like to live in if we didn't make over $30,000 a year. So aesthetically, I don't think it's going to have will it have an impact on the groundwater? I doubt it. I really do. The lake, I mean, interestingly enough, I bought a house. I'm in the woodland, what they call the woodland property, but I don't have lake rights on my deed. I don't know how that worked out. Everybody told me I owned a little piece next to the boathouse, but we can't find that in the deed anywhere. So I think as long as we have our beach, I think the people are going to be able to have access to get to the beach. And of course, the boat launch, as you know, is there. They can go in swimming. I think what we ought to be doing as a municipality is saying, look, COA set the rules. The Mount Laurel decision was made a long time ago. The administration has picked the best possible place that they could find for right now to secure that money so that it didn't go on to the taxpayers. At the end of the day, John, does it really happen? We don't know. Will folks like you and some of the other neighbors, will I be there? Will I be complaining that I don't think that it's the right traffic? I don't think that the people are right. I don't think the aesthetics are right. There could be 1,500 reasons that we all come up with of why it's not good, and the planning board may shoot it down. We don't know. But we need to continue to move forward with this so that we can secure the money before COA sticks its greedy hands out there and the state takes away from us again.
One of the things that I didn't understand before you got here was things like the Morris Chase property being grandfathered and not having this, apply to these kind of rules. Which you see this big development going in right up the street, it doesn't seem like, they're helping out at all.
Right.
But, we don't know those things ahead of time.
Right.
No.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
Hello, Peter Duran, 88 Sand Shore, President. I've been here quite some time.
Haven't seen you in a while.
I am at the corner of Sand Shore Road and Stonewall Court, back to this property. I have a number of questions for the council. I can tell you that on Monday mornings, garbage trucks and recycling trucks back down that road because they can't make the turn into the Stonewall Court. The first question is, well, see how crazy. If we had $1.2 million in the trust fund, how long has it been sitting in the trust fund?
Wow. I don't know the answer to that question, but I would say it's Sherry might.
The trust fund was opened in 1999, and the 1.2 million has grown gradually over that time. We didn't start out with 1.2 million. Okay.
Been there for quite some time. The trust fund itself.
The trust fund itself has been there since 1999.
Growing based on it.
yes, it's grown.
Other question for you, is this part of the budget for the township? Is this part of the land use master plan? Is it part of the housing element of the master plan? How does it fit into the master plan?
It's not part of the budget for the township. It is an approved spending plan for the state of New Jersey. And I don't know, I would rather guess that the master plan doesn't address it at all. Yes, you know the answer?
No, but I think I can possibly answer where I think you're going with this. Mount Olive's not alone in why this money wasn't spent in the last 4 years. As everybody knows, when Governor Christie came in, there was a firm commitment to abolish COA. So during the whole time, there was an edict back in 2008 that told all the townships by 2012, July 17th to be exact, you had to have this money obligated or spent by this date. Most towns, and Mount Olive included, did nothing wrong by sitting back, waiting to see what happened with COA, because the governor came in very firm that this was going to go by the wayside, so the townships would have been imprudent to spend that money if the rules are constantly shifting. Around the turn of the past year, through the courts, and it's still changing, we saw there was another ruling recently, but it seemed that COA, or at that time, since COA was not existing, now it's existing again, that it didn't matter, the successor to that, the DCA, was going to hold the town's feet to the fire and say, you're going to lose this money. That's why all the towns in New Jersey had sat there for a couple of years waiting to see what happened. So we're sitting on these developers' fees. Do we have to spend it? Do we not have to spend it? Do we have a housing obligation? Do we not have a housing obligation? That's how we arrived at this point. Around the turn of the year, 6-7 months ago, every town now they're scrambling. You got to spend that money, even though COA doesn't exist. Supreme Court turns around, COA does exist. The monster's back. We still have the deadline. So I think that's where you're going with your question of, we've had this money for so long, why hasn't this been spent? And it goes to Trenton politics, where 2008, the rules change, they change again, they change yet again. January 1st, 2012, you have to spend it, you have to do something. And that's where we are. I hope that helps.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. Are zoning changes going to be needed for this piece of property since it was a commercial piece of property? Or is it a commercial piece of property in your residential neighborhood?
I don't believe that any zoning changes are required. I think it's a residential zone.
But it wasn't a residential.
Doesn't matter if it's a non-conforming use and you're turning it back into a conforming use, then the zoning is appropriate.
Doesn't sound like that might need to be investigated.
I don't think that it does. And all of those issues have been looked at by our planner.
Has a traffic study been done on the street?
No, it's a concept proposal currently, and there is no formal building application at the current time.
All right. What are the other costs that are associated with this project, and how is that going to be funded?
All funded through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
Has anybody done a state historic preservation review of this building? Constructed in 1890?
No, as far as I know, it's not on the list of buildings which have state historical value currently.
So the answer was no, nobody's looked at it?
No,
Or
no one,
it's not on the list?
both.
I know that for a fact. And the reason I'm asking the question, is this was a stable for the estate that was in that piece of part of that.
I am 99% sure that it is not on the state historical list. In fact, I would bet the ranch that it's not, and no one has looked at putting it on the list. Yeah. That's certainly an issue which would have been raised by Kathy Murphy at the time that this was all being discussed.
Is anybody taking a look at asbestos or lead-based paint in this building? Across the age?
The building is going to be demolished.
So then that material will need to be handled?
Yes, it will all be handled and will be part of the contribution by the township towards the project.
You said you had looked at other sites in the township. Can you tell me what the other sites were and how this site was chosen?
I can't. The analysis was done through the planning department, through Chuck McGrarty and Catherine Natafalusi, and ultimately this site was identified for a number of different reasons. The amount of units that could be built on it, the nature of the current status of the property in terms of its condition. I can't tell you what other sites were looked at, but I can tell you that the township is constantly reviewing all of the different sites that are available for building in the township for a number of different reasons, both in terms of commercial development and in terms of how to spend the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And I recommend that you contact Chuck McGrarty, who could give you that information. You can tell him that I had indicated that I was unaware of the answer, and speak to Chuck further on it.
I have seen the Washington Township buildings. They're very nice looking. They're also in the area next to a self-storage facility. So you've already answered the question as to how this property fits under the Highlands Act?
The Highlands Act is a non-issue in terms of the project moving forward.
What about the rule that you can't have impervious surfaces greater than the at-present?
That issue has been looked at by Homeless Solutions in terms of the number of units that they could place on the property after the building was actually demolished, and the footprint that they would ultimately use. But again, I suggest you contact Homeless Solutions. Obviously, any project that's going to go forward is going to have to go through the planning board, and all of the I's would have to be dotted and the T's would have to be crossed in terms of Highlands, in terms of on-site stormwater management, in terms of available water source. All of those issues would ultimately have to be addressed at the time that there's a formal application that's being made to actually construct the project. At the current time, the administration is taking steps to secure the $1.2 million. It required us to move forward with a spending plan which has been approved by the state of New Jersey with respect to this property. And ultimately, in light of the fact that we didn't hear back from the homeowner, we took the extraordinary step at that point to move towards eminent domain to take the property. But again, all the technical issues with respect to the property would have to be answered at the time that the project is being built, including traffic flow. As I said, the availability of water to service the facility, and all of the other issues which would be of concern to the existing residents of that area. And everyone would have input into the process. But you have to understand, I understand where you're going with the questions in terms of the specifics of the project. A lot of...
The reason I'm asking these questions here is that it doesn't sound to me, and I hear what you're saying, but it doesn't sound to me like all the different aspects of this particular property have been reviewed.
We're done.
And to me, that would be something that I think would be very important.
Ultimately would have to be...
Let me just finish my comment. I've looked at the Washington Township property. It's a very nice development. It's also on a through road. It's not on a dead-end street.
I understand that. That doesn't mean that this particular piece of property in and of itself is not compatible with the type of development that they're looking to do here. I think you need to take a look at the plan, take a look at their analysis in terms of the specifics that you're looking for, and then come back and educate the planning board at the time that the application is actually coming forward. As I said, the township is already committed to this process. We didn't have a choice. We had to move forward with a process that was going to secure the $1.2 million. Ultimately, at the end of the day, if the specifics don't work on that site, perhaps the project needs to be scaled down to a certain degree. Perhaps the site doesn't work at all and needs to be abandoned at that point in time. So, by no means is this the end of the process. We're in the middle of the process. There is no specific plan which is in place. There was a concept plan which was discussed and shown to us, which you can probably get from Homeless Solutions. They're looking for community input in terms of making this fit into the community as best as possible. And I really would love somebody like you who's got, obviously some background, through your engineering degree, to be involved in making sure that this project really minimizes the impact on the existing residents of the township.
I have a question. Let me, kind of give you some of my take. I believe that eminent domain is a slippery slope. take a look at these, this is what happened in Groton, Connecticut, when they took over properties by one after another. I'm very hesitant to go down the street and I appreciate that you have all looked at that issue very strongly. I guess my question is, the owner of this property was to take the property, demolish the building, put up single-family homes on that property. It's like 1 per half acre, which is probably within the zone. What would be the rateables associated with that type of development?
You know, you're probably looking at a house which would generate, my guess is somewhere in the neighborhood of, let's use a number of $10,000 to $15,000 per year in taxes. Not knowing, ultimately, you would then increase the affordable housing share that Mount Olive would have by probably 1 unit, about 1 unit. So you probably would be looking, if you put 4 houses on it, you'd probably be looking at about $40,000 a year in rateables.
Versus what are we gonna gain by having these 20 units?
But we need pilot. It's a pilot. So I don't know ultimately, it's not a straight rateable situation. It's a pilot program because of the nature of what's being done. There's a flat tax that's paid. It's not based upon necessarily the value of the property. And there's no contribution under a pilot program to the school system. It's a flat number, which is consistent with this type of development throughout the state of New Jersey.
If anything, we may end up with a pilot net taxes ahead under the situation, depending on the percentage that goes to the schools as compared to what we get out of the pilot.
If it's left or right pocket, it doesn't really
Yeah.
make much of a difference.
Same tax dollars.
Are there any public notification requirements for this type of action?
In terms of what, eminent domain?
Yeah, for this particular piece of property and the development of this piece of property. The reason I ask the question is that I know that myself and my neighbors, the first time we heard about this thing was in last week's newspaper. That's why we're here.
I appreciate that. I'd have to leave that to the attorney. I don't know the answer to the question.
I'm sure that this is.
I did, but I don't know the answer to it.
I don't disagree with you, but because of the sensitive nature of the discussions with the property owner, it was absolutely necessary to keep it quiet until, at least in executive session up until this point, as we do with every time that we negotiate. I don't disagree with you in terms of your concerns and your desire to have had further notice of the fact that your neighborhood was going to be impacted by a decision being made by the municipality. I'd leave it to the attorney in terms of the eminent domain. I don't know the answer to the question.
I can't really speak to it off the top of my head. I'd have to look into it as far as the public notice requirements for the surrounding property owners. But I'd be more than happy to look into that issue for you.
I know anytime I apply for a permit for environmental issues, I notify everybody within 200 feet of that property and the municipality too. So
It's, I would imagine, I'm guessing at this point, but based upon my legal, the fact that I am a lawyer, but I don't really practice in eminent domain, and we've already started the process. And the process would have been filed that there is no notice obligation to surrounding property owners by way of eminent domain. That's my guess. I'm not 100% sure. And I only say that because I assume that our crack legal counsel would have followed the laws with respect to eminent domain.
Thank you very much.
I'm right next to Cobblestones. Last year, every time it rained, I have a basement, it flooded. Now, is that gonna happen with this development?
I would tell you that the law now requires, this is the law, what happens in reality may be something completely different, as we know, because every time we have a developer that comes in and puts in 200 houses, they tell us we're getting no more kids in our school based upon state law. But the law requires that any stormwater related to this particular project needs to stay on site. I would imagine,
I'm talking about level
I do, no, I would imagine that it should improve your situation based upon current standards and what would be required of the project. I assume that the law requires that all of the water remain on-site and be disposed of on-site. So however they would do it, it would take water that is now coming off the property to your house and would dispose of it on the property. That is the law in New Jersey as it currently stands. So I would assume that it would improve your situation.
What happened to the development of Chamberlain Avenue?
Simoff, they're talking about, Rob.
Simoff?
Simoff property, that's right, Chamberlain, it borders it.
Simoff property is currently approved for development. It was originally approved as an adult active community, and it was a development which had its COA obligations being satisfied on site. Ultimately, the law changed based upon the time that it had been approved, and he was able to convert his age-restricted units to market rental, market value units. So he's got approval for about 200-plus units. He's looking for a developer to buy his interest in the property and actually build the project. And my understanding is that he just recently may have somebody who's interested in actually moving forward with that project.
Originally it was zoned for low-income housing behind the BP, and also have the senior center on the other side, and behind the school.
Originally, it was zoned as, it was, there was a change in the zoning. Originally, it was zoned as commercial or residential, and then
That's
got
right.
changed to commercial.
Yes, it was.
Right, and then ultimately, the township at the point in time was looking to take advantage of adult active communities, which were the hot development at the time. So we created a zone. This is probably 5-6 years ago that we created the zone. It wasn't affordable housing, it's market rate housing, but it was for people who were 55 and older. A portion of that development necessarily had to be set aside for affordable housing, because as you build those 200-plus houses, it's exactly what we discussed before, it creates a further obligation. Every time you build a house, you have a greater obligation to provide affordable housing. Every time you create a job in Mount Olive, you have a greater obligation to provide affordable housing. So that particular development will satisfy, when built, will satisfy the affordable housing component of what that development ultimately creates.
Actually, Rob,
yeah.
correct recollection is that there was a developer before Simoff who had requested the zone change from commercial to active adult community.
Maybe.
Ms. Laybell?
Rob, I think what she's talking about, when that development, that whole process was going through, off of Chamberlain,
Yeah.
the affordable housing units were going to be on site right there, and that's where they were going to be put, because they were concerned about the busing. That's the specific part she's talking about. So the question I think you're looking at is, now that it's not going to be adult active, are they still going to locate the affordable housing units in that same part of that tract?
You know what, the plan was approved. They have preliminary approval on their site. I think they have preliminary and final approval on their
Yes,
site.
they had both.
So they will have to build unless there are changes which are made consistent with the plans that were ultimately adopted.
Right.
So although what was originally adult active will now be market rate units, the affordable housing aspect where they were located, the number of affordable housing units will still be subject to the approvals that they received from the planning board.
So basically, as far as we know, the only thing that changes, it's not going to be adult active, it's going to be, market rate, and the age, and the affordable units are still going to be in the same location.
But you also have to remember that although they're market rate, they're 1- and 2-bedroom units. So you're
Right.
not talking about large families being able to
Small,
live in those.
yep. Was that the question that you were asking? Eventually. Eventually, yes.
I have one more question. The water problem that we have is quite bad in that area. With anybody that has a basement, they always get flooded.
Yes.
Will there be a basement in this building?
I don't know the answer to that question.
If they stay the same as the project in Washington, I remember asking that question, no basement.
No basement. Slab.
Also, Alex?
Yes, Ms. Lebo.
Also, with the water issue in that area, Mr. Kenning, our business administrator, that's the same area you had the engineer out for the drainage, and you have, you're going to be clearing out the stormwater basins more frequently before storm. It's
Yeah.
only like, it's the same exact neighborhood.
Yes, the same neighborhood. We had the flood engineer come up, and the main thrust of that was over on Church Street to find out whether the size of the pipe
Right.
was inadequately engineered, or the recommendation did come back that the proper size of the pipe would be a 36-inch pipe. Unfortunately, the level of the road and the height of the water table there is prohibitive of that, but the policy that the mayor put in was ahead of any storm, and Mr. Quinn was here before, but he's been part of that policy. If we have any major storms, that they will make sure they jet vac or do whatever they have to do to make sure those storm drains are cleared out ahead of any.
In all those streets in that area, Mr. Canning?
Yeah, and the follow-ups, the rest of the outlets seem to have been pretty good and holding their own. Those pipes are a little bit bigger, so they haven't acquired the sediment that the Church Street pipe has. That seems to be the one that really builds up the sediment quite frequently. I was out there with Timmy about 3 weeks ago, and we took a look, and they were up to now in good shape.
Okay.
You're at 19 Scanshore?
Stonewalled.
Oh, 19 Stonewall? All right, I'll get in touch with Tim and Jean, and we'll follow up on that.
Do we have a number that we can get back to you at?
Yeah.
Could you
Call me at 9:30.
Wait.
I would-
No,
Don't
over,
put it on the
no,
record.
don't put on the
I have your
record.
address.
You can
I'll
put it here at the
I'll come and
clerk.
bang on your door if are you home? Okay, then I will be there.
Thank you.
Hi, Karen Baker, 9 Stonewall Court. First, I'd like to thank Mr. Canning for getting back to me as quickly as he did
You're welcome.
via email. With the requirements, COLA requirements, what is the date on which we have to meet these requirements before they reappropriate the money?
I'll let Mr. Canning answer that question because he's quite familiar with.
July 17th. It's about, what's that, 21 days away.
The funds have to be committed. What that actually means is unclear.
Does COA have any appeal process?
They don't seem to, there may be one, I guess our planner would know better than I did. From what I've heard, they don't seem to want to have one, but I could be erroneous in that. If they have one, I don't know. The planner, Chuck, would probably know better than I.
Appeal process to whom? To the municipality or to a resident in the municipality?
To the municipality. In other words, can the town present our situation? We have precious little property left to house 45 affordable.
The answer to your question is no. There is no appeal process. There are many municipalities who are in the same predicament that we're in. And the state is acting like a bulldog here in terms of the way that they're forcing us to act.
Will I'm assuming an environmental impact study will be done?
Whatever the planning board requires will be presented. Anytime that an application comes before the planning board, the applicant has the ability to request waivers of certain types of studies, impacts. And again, the planning board file at that point would be subject to public scrutiny and certainly subject to any concerns that residents might have as to what is or should be required when an actual building plan has been presented.
And who would do that? The township have control over who does the environmental, any kind of impact study, or is it the person who says entity building, or?
Homeless Solutions. Homeless Solutions.
But, Rob, if Homeless Solutions has their environmental expert, we also have ours as well. So there could be two opinions, not just one. I think that's what you're asking. Do we just take their opinion? And so it would be, because I've seen that when I was on the planning board. We had, what was his name, Rob?
Jeff
was?
Jeff
Keller, yeah.
Dr. Keller.
Dr. Keller, and he would review what was being presented as well, so it's not just like, you don't just take...
It's not so much the environmental impact as it is the engineering
Mhm.
impact that would occur as a result. In other words, are you going to have water off-site? Are you appropriately dealing with all of the issues? I don't know whether or not asbestos is an issue here, but if it is, then it will have to be dealt with appropriately and when the building is ultimately taken down, consistent with state law. And so there should be no impact at all to the residents as this building is taken down. But environmental impact doesn't seem to me to be really what's important here as it is an engineering impact. I don't know if that's what you're really meaning to say.
No, I have environmental concerns.
What kind of-
You're gonna have large trash containers when it rains, it's gonna run off. You're gonna have parking lots. Now we already have a flooding problem. To replace all of that ground,
Yeah, those are engineering aspects.
you consider those engineering?
They are
Yeah,
engi-
they're-
What runs into the lake to be environmental. We
It's-
pay a fortune for sewers and we still don't have a clean lake.
The law requires that any off-site, any water, any stormwater has to be disposed of on site. And that's done from an engineering perspective. The engineer comes in and they, whether it's dry wells, whether it's whatever system is appropriate at that point in time, would necessarily be required. And again, those are the technical aspects that are dealt with at the time that a specific plan is submitted to the planning board.
Now, do we have access to, can we as residents come to the planning board meetings?
Oh,
Most certainly.
Absolutely. And
Absolutely.
there's a public
Absolutely.
portion too, that you're able to get up and ask questions. Every professional that comes up, you have a right to question him, based on the testimony that he's about to give.
Thank you very much.
Tom Hyman, I live in Stonewall Court, I've been in 1971. I got a question about that. Are they taking that whole building down, the big stone building and everything?
Yep.
That is the plan.
Because you said that's residential, right?
I believe that it's zoned, that area is zoned residential, although that building was,
Because the people that have it now.
Yeah.
Turned around, it's supposed to be a dead end. They opened up the gates, and now they're running an ambulance service out of there. And I complained about them flying in and out of the road with their grandchildren. And I'm afraid they're gonna get hit, but it does no good.
Who did you complain to?
Every police officer I ever seen along the road. And I called. And if you yell at the people to slow down, all you get is a hand gesture.
I mean, that sounds something, Sean, that we should at least,
I know.
I-
I was wondering, because if they were gonna be there, and then they put 20 more units for housing on that little dead end, that was gonna make it unbearable.
they're not going to be there.
No, yeah.
The entrance will be on the other side.
No, the use of the property will be totally changed. The ambulances will not be there.
It was just gonna be those lots on the side.
No,
Little building.
no. Again, I think what you need to do, and what I suggest someone from the group, is to get the concept plan from Homeless Solutions and speak to them about the concerns.
So you understand what my concern is?
I do. The entire site will be changed from what it currently is to what is being proposed if it's built.
Thank you.
Mr. Council President, if I could address the ambulance, I would gladly get on it. I think by the time I got it solved, we may have control of the property, so I can look into it. The property owner being non-responsive, I don't have much hope of them voluntarily complying with that. We'd have to force them into charges in court. It's 21 days away until we possibly invoke any rights we have to, so I can look into it.
And within those 21 days, when would they be required to vacate the property?
I'm not sure. I can do a bifurcated investigation on this, parallel one with the enforcement and the other one attempting to get control and.
Yeah, I mean, if, you know,
voluntary
if they
settlement.
are, if they
I
are.
think you have to be very careful in terms of how you move forward with this particular property for a number of different reasons.
Yes.
Is there anybody else from the public wish to be heard?
Question about eminent domain. Has the township ever instituted eminent domain
Yes.
Has it been against a residential property or against commercial properties?
I would say that certainly I am aware of one situation where the township brought an eminent domain action against a undeveloped piece of property which was in a residential zone.
I'm just, again, as you've heard before, I'm very uncomfortable with the whole concept of eminent domain. I realize in some cases it's necessary, if you have to build a bridge or a road, or maybe a new firehouse that needs more property, you know, those type of things. But I caution you to be very careful about going down the slippery slope of eminent domain, particularly on a piece of property that actually is more than just an undeveloped vacant land. It can become, if you're successful with one eminent domain proceeding, it can become nice and comfortable and eventually become an easy out to accomplish further gains. And I know some towns have abused it a bit. And I think one of those, my opinion, as a resident of this town, I don't like the idea of our town being a town that is favorable to eminent domain proceedings.
Mr. McDonald, I share your concerns with that eminent domain issue. I mean, this is obviously an avenue that the administration saw was the easiest way to meet our obligation. And, you know, I share your concerns that we're going about this route in order to make it more easier on us. Mr. Mayor.
Disagree with that assessment, Alex. We came to the determination that this is the only way that we could do what is required of us as fiduciary obligors of the taxpayers of Mount Olive. We do not favor eminent domain here in Mount Olive. We can't generally afford eminent domain. I am aware of only one other situation since I've been involved, since 2001, where we did begin an eminent domain proceeding. Ultimately, as I said, when we looked at all of the factors, at the end of the day, this move is the best move for the property owner in terms of her being able to maximize the dollars that she can get from this property. Had we gone into a direct sale of the property, the same options which are available to her in eminent domain would not have been available to her. Ultimately, the township would have had to have taken action with respect to this property, even if we weren't considering purchasing it because of the state of that the property is in terms of its condition and it being unsafe. The property owner had indicated to us a desire to sell us the property. And so when we put all of the factors on the table, and I'm just talking about eminent domain, I'm not talking about the location where it is, which is obviously the concern of most of you that are here. We balanced everything. We took a hard look at it. None of us up here favor eminent domain. It's a valid point that you raised, Ned, and we all are mindful of the misuse of the power which has been granted to us sitting up here. But in this particular instance, when all of the factors were considered, it was the right decision. And a majority of the council agreed, and that's why we moved forward with it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else from the public wish to be heard? Seeing none, I'd like to adjourn to the public meeting. Get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? I'd like to call to order the Township Council public meeting of June 26, 2012. Lisa, can you please read the Open Public Meetings Act announcement?
According to the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of this meeting has been given to the Daily Record. Notice has been posted in the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Drakestown Road, Mount Olive Township, New Jersey, and notices were sent to those requesting the same.
Roll call.
Mr. Perkins?
Here.
Mr. Mania?
Here.
Mr. Ferrante?
Here.
Mr. Nicastro?
Here.
Mr. Walsh?
Here.
Mrs. Laybow?
Here.
Mr. Roman?
Here. Okay, we're on to approval of previous minutes. Mr. Perkins?
Yes, Mr. President, I move for approval of the June 12, 2012 workshop, public meeting, and closed session.
I'll second it.
Been moved and seconded. Roll call.
Mr. Perkins?
Yes.
Mr. Mania?
Yes.
Mr. Frente?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mrs. Laybow?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes. Okay, we're on to correspondence. There are 34 pieces of correspondence. Does anyone wish to make any comments, questions? Okay, seeing none, we're on to ordinances for public hearing. I open the hearing to the public on ordinance number 19-2012, entitled An Ordinance of the Township of Mount Olive, County of Morris, and State of New Jersey authorizing the acquisition of certain property known as 20-23 Stonewall Court Drive, Bud Lake, New Jersey, also known as Block 3203, lots 21 and 28, and if necessary, authorizing the institution of eminent domain proceedings. This is your second opportunity to be heard on this ordinance. Does anyone from public wish to be heard?
Mr. Duran?
Okay. All right, Mr. Mania.
Mr. President, I move for adoption and final passage of ordinance number 19-2012.
Mr. You still wish to be heard?
Yeah, that's so.
You're given that second opportunity.
My recommendation, I understand the financial aspects of it. It sounds to me, based on what we've heard tonight, that this particular opportunity to take this piece of property and develop it into affordable housing needs to be studied further. I'm not hearing among our group that the diligence associated with some of the issues that we've raised tonight is addressed adequately. And I would leave it at that.
Thank you.
When's the proper time for council comment coming up as we go?
It's coming right up.
I just don't want you to pass over it.
Nope, it's been moved.
No.
It has
Move
to
it yet, John?
I moved it. Yes.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Council,
No.
Who seconded it?
right.
Thank you.
Now you can talk about it.
Okay, anyone from council? Mr. Walsh.
Okay. I just wanted to address, as a elected official and a township resident and someone who feels strongly about these issues, I just think I would be remiss if I didn't. I just made a couple quick notes here to everyone who came to speak out against this. I hear traffic, I hear visibility, I hear, what was it, undesirable tenants or whatever the comment was. I got to tell you, I see it as prejudice. I'm just going to come right out and tell you. And I'm going to say this as nicely as I can. I'm just going to leave it at that. I just think that this is what's wrong with this country. This is a good opportunity to put some good housing. I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm ready to come out of my skin if you want to know the truth, and I'm just going to leave it at that. Thank you.
Ms. Laybow?
Thank you, Mr. Roman. I just want to make sure everybody understands, just because we haven't voted on it yet, but if this is approved, it doesn't mean that building's going to be built. It still has to go through the whole entire planning process. And believe me, I will be at every single one of those meetings at the planning board as well. This is just the first step. Is that correct, Mr. Greenbaum? And so this does not mean this is a definite go ahead 100%. All of the issues that you guys have identified tonight all have to be looked at. All those reports will be brought to the planning board and will be discussed at length. So this does not mean that we have to get our plan in place to secure this, to keep these funds in town. And that's what is that correct?
Yeah, this is the first step.
This is just the first step.
If this goes forward, the whole planning board application process starts, the concept plans, as well as there's another level of experts that have to jump in here, including a hydrologist, which has to
Right.
study the water issue, which some folks had brought up, and it's very important to find out capacities. It's a long process, and certainly the very valid concerns that were brought up here today can be expressed more in detail to the planning board, and I think they're in a better position to appropriately respond and ensure their concerns are taken into consideration.
Right, this doesn't mean that the building's going to get torn down tomorrow and it's going to get started. I mean, this is a long road.
Mr. Perkins?
Gonna get torn down Thursday. I would just, it's an uncomfortable situation personally for myself. Obviously, I'm a veteran. You know, government seizing property is, you know, kind of something that, you know, I lifted up a rifle and killed people for to prevent that from happening. It's, if it wasn't the last resort, if there were, had the negotiations gone more smoothly, then the word eminent domain wouldn't be there. Unfortunately, the timeline is getting closer. The clock is just about ready to tick, and we can't get a firm answer. We've made, I think, a fantastic offer based upon assessed value. It's been appraised. We just need to get this moving forward, as Mrs. Labo had said, and I think we've talked about it, even the mayor has said. The planning board, I won't be there because I typically at Thursday nights I have places to be. It's a place to vent, to bring your discussions, Peter. Obviously, you know, that's where we're going to get our voices heard, to make sure that everything is addressed. Hopefully this goes through. I don't know what inevitably could be built there. Is 20 units too much? It could be, you know. Crown Tower was way too much for us, you know, that fought against that. So we don't know. But we do know that this particular ordinance for this particular piece of property, to secure that money that we have taken into our Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the only way to stop having to pass that on into my pocket and yours is to do this. If the word eminent domain didn't need to be there, trust me, I don't think any of us would have had a problem not voting. But I'm going to be voting. I'm voting in favor of it. I voted in favor of the introduction. I think we need to do our due diligence. As the mayor stated, look, you guys all know me. I don't live that far away. Dave, I'll get a set of plans. I work with these people. I'll get a concept plan, and then I'll get it to you, and you can distribute it off to everybody. All right, that'll make it easier instead of you guys trying to contact Homeless Solutions.
Mr. Mania, then Mr. Mayor.
I just, when you said Crown Towers, it brings back memories.
Oh, God, yeah.
18 meetings, as you can attest, Mr. McDonald. So things aren't just done haphazardly. It took 18 months to go through Crown Tower. And Mr. McDonald, you were there just about every meeting. So we don't just haphazardly do things. We do them thoroughly. And if anyone has a better idea of how we can salvage that $1.2 million, please share it with us. We'd be glad to hear it.
Mr.
Thank
Mayor.
you.
Yeah, unfortunately, John, it's either this project or it's no project, based
Right.
upon the deadlines that the state has imposed on us. But let me comment on a couple of things. I don't see eminent domain as the issue here. I don't see prejudice as the issue here, and I apologize. I don't think that there is one person here who came here because of their concern over the low-income housing that's going in. It's, as I see it, and the only issue which really troubles me is the impact to the existing homeowners. Whether it's single-family, multi-million-dollar houses, 10 townhouses, 20, it's the impact to the neighborhood. Is there going to be flooding? What are the traffic issues? How is it going to affect my right to enjoy my property? And that's what I got out of the discussion tonight. And I tell you that it troubles me. It troubles me, but sitting up here, we have to make decisions, and every decision that we make, unfortunately, impacts somebody, a friend, a relative. Dave, you and I go way back. Pete, you and I go way back. You know what? Years in Mount Olive Township. We don't make decisions lightly. We try and make decisions for the right reasons. And we try and make decisions based upon the information that's given to us ultimately at the end of the day, whether it comes from professionals or it comes from the impacted residents in the township. So I look forward to moving on with this discussion as it progresses, to refine it in a way that everyone will benefit from it, And I'm hopeful that at the end of the process, we're all going to end up with a better neighborhood at the end of the day. You're going to get rid of an eyesore. You're going to get rid of the ambulances that are there. You're going to have architecture which is going to fit into the existing neighborhood. Homeless Solutions is going to hold meetings to make sure that their impact is minimalized in the neighborhood. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the planning board will take the steps that are necessary to protect the existing homeowners. So I am hopeful at the end of the day that this is going to be an improvement rather than actually taking away from what exists there currently.
Absolutely.
Anyone else from council? I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't touch on this subject. I do not believe that the residents that came out solely because of prejudice. It's, you know, when you have a project going on of any significance in your neighborhood, you feel the need to speak. You know, and whether this was going to be a McMansion or a 20-unit building. Some of the same questions would have been raised, you know, regarding stormwater runoff, traffic, and as such. My issue with this is the eminent domain issue. I don't necessarily have a problem with Homeless Solutions because I know there'll be subsequent meetings to make sure that the project will fit with the neighborhood and will be the best fit for that location, as it was in Washington Township. Earlier, you know, I had made a comment that this was probably the easiest solution, and I believe, Mr. Mayor, you said that was the only solution. If this property owner had been able to maintain her business there and the nursing facility, and the building was not in disrepair, where would we go? How would we fulfill that obligation? Would we come in and take over their building because, you know, that was the only solution? So that is the issue that I have. Yes, the building is in disrepair, and it's falling apart, and those are avenues that the administration should be able to take, whether the property owner we were going to take it over or not. My issue is solely with telling somebody that we have a better use for their property because it's the only way to fulfill an obligation that unfortunately the state has put a gun to our heads and has forced us to take over somebody's property. If that property owner wished to do nothing with her property and wanted to sell it to somebody else at a loss, that is her right and her privilege. So that is why I will be voting no to taking over their property based on eminent domain. Roll call.
Mr. Perkins?
Yes.
Mr. Mania?
Yes.
Mr. Frente?
Yes.
Mr. Nicastro?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mrs. Labow?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
No. Ordinance number 19-2012 is passed on second reading, and I hereby direct the clerk to forward a copy of the same to the mayor and publish the notice of adoption as required by law. Okay, we're on to ordinances for first reading with a second reading of July 10th, 2012. Ordinance number 20-2012 entitled, An Ordinance of the Township Council of the Township of Mount Olive amending Ordinance number 30-2010 of the Township of Mount Olive entitled Salaries of Certain Non-Union Employees. Okay, where are we? Mr. Nicastro.
Yes, I move ordinance number 20-2012 to be introduced by title and passed on first reading, that a meeting be held on July 10th, 2012 at 7 p.m. at the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Drakestown Road, Bud Lake, New Jersey, for a public hearing, consideration of second reading, and passage of said ordinance, and that the clerk be directed to publish, post, and make available said ordinance in accordance with the requirements of the law.
I'll second it.
Been moved and second. Any council discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Perkins? It's
Yes.
Mr. Mania?
Yes.
Mr. Frente?
Yes.
Mr. Nicastro?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mrs. Labow?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes. Okay, the next item on the agenda for first reading is ordinance number 21-2012 entitled Bond Ordinance Providing for Upgrades to the Indian Spring Well House in and by the Township of Mount Olive in the County of Morris, New Jersey, appropriating $95,000 thereof and authorizing the issuance of $90,250 bonds or notes of the township for financing the cost thereof. Mr. Walsh?
I move that ordinance number 21 be introduced by 21-2012 be introduced by title and passed on first reading, and that a meeting be held on July 10th, 2012 at 7 p.m. at the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Drakestown Road, Bud Lake, New Jersey, for a public hearing, consideration of second reading, and passage of said ordinance, and that the clerk be directed to publish, post, and make available said ordinance in accordance with the requirements of the law.
I'll second it.
Been moved and seconded. Any council discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Perkins?
Yes.
Mr. Mania?
Yes.
Mr. Frante?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mrs. Leybow?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes. Okay, the next item for first reading is ordinance number 24-2012.
I believe we're going to take the next two ordinances off.
Yeah, he skipped over, he went to,
Yeah,
well, we
22
should,
and 23 are off. We're on to 24.
Okay.
Entitled, An Ordinance of the Township of Mount Olive in the County of Morris, State of New Jersey, setting the speed limit on Corey Road at 25 miles per hour to be incorporated into Chapter 245 of the Mount Olive Township Code. Mr. Walsh?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on,
We're on 24.
22 and 23 are off.
so it's going to be 24?
Right.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I move that ordinance number 24-2012 be introduced by title and passed on first reading, and that a meeting be held on July 10th, 2012 at 7 p.m. at the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Drakestown Road, Bud Lake, New Jersey, for a public hearing, consideration of second reading, and passage of said ordinance, and that the clerk be directed to publish, post, and make available said ordinance in accordance with the requirements of the law.
I'll second it.
Been moved in second. Any council discussion? Want to make reiterate my statements from before, that if this council proceeds to lower the speed limit on this road, just make sure that it is for the sole purpose to making sure that that speed limit is enforced, and it's not for a feel-good, because we had some residents in the area wanting to lower the speed limit in that area, and if that's the avenue that we wish to take, then we should make sure that not to set a precedent when somebody else wants their road reduced, that you should be prepared to follow the same. Ms. Leybow?
I take exception to the suggestion that we're just doing this to feel good. I would like to have every residential street in Mount Olive 25 miles per hour, and I do very strongly and firmly believe that to have this 25 miles per hour is the right decision for this location for numerous reasons, and absolutely at no time would I ever vote on something just so that I could feel good. I try to make all of my decisions based on what I believe is in the best interest of the residents of Mount Olive. Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Perkins?
No.
Mr. Mania?
Yes.
Mr. Frante?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mrs. Leybow?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
No. Okay, we're on to consent resolutions. We have 11 resolutions. Does anyone wish to remove any to non-consent? Okay. Seeing none, Mr. Mania?
Mr. President, I move the approval of the consent resolutions 1 through 11.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Anybody, any questions? Comments? Anyone from the public? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Perkins?
Yes.
Mr. Mania?
Yes.
Mr. Frante?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mrs. Leybow?
Yes, and I just want to make one really quick comment. I'm sorry. Our audit is on there also. Is one of the resolutions, and I just want to say that we got a very good report. Thank you very much to Sherry and the administration, especially Sherry. Thank you very much. I just want to make sure that people understand this is a very important document that we are approving by resolution, and my answer is yes. My vote is yes.
Mr. Roman?
Thanks for the recognition.
Yes. Okay, we're on to consent motions. Mr. Ferrante?
I move consent motions number 1 and 2.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is anyone from the public, any questions on the bill list?
But I could probably answer that. They have contracted with them for the find a home for the swim team. That's to the recreation. They used to be, I believe, at the Flanders Swim Club. They don't have access to that anymore. They now have to have a location for the, I guess, the swim club, swim team, the competitive swim team in town. It's done through the recreation. I believe it's offset by user fees. I'm not sure. I'd have to get back to you.
It absolutely is offset. We don't fund the rec utility at all, so it's money in, money out.
Yes.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Perkins?
Yes.
Mr. Mania?
Yes.
Mr. Frente?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mrs. Laybow?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes. Okay, we're on to administrative reports. Mr. Canning, Mr. Mayor?
I just wanted to let everyone know that the administration is moving forward with replacing the sign that is out front. You will be getting an ordinance to amend our capital ordinance to reflect the purchase of a sign. We believe that the cost of the sign, which I had indicated I wanted to install, which would be an electronic sign that would be able to provide information to the residents as they pass by the building, such as flu shots or whatever other important information we needed to put on the board, is going to be approximately $45,000 to $50,000. As we bring the ordinance, we will let you know exactly what the cost is. Anyone who wants to participate in what we're ultimately going to purchase, get in touch with Lisa Pignataro, and we'll have a consensus in terms of where we're going.
Mr. Canning?
Yeah, just echoing on that, we'd have to, incorporate that in the bid specs and, hopefully get a team consensus as to the style. The other things we're working on, as you saw in the package, the soccer and field lighting are set to go. We anticipate construction on both of them will start immediately after the carnival, hopefully the morning after. And that's it.
Mr. Canning, on the, how's the sign come along for that turn into CVS?
I had updated you today. I checked with Mr. Brzezinski. I believe the person to contact is the subcontractor of CVS. They are getting DOT approval. Again, every week we're asking where we at. We anticipate that we're putting enough heat on that it'll be done hopefully this week, maybe next week.
And what happened with the property there, right at the triangle there, at the CVS? There was like Morris County hazmat units there last week?
Yeah, about 2 weeks ago. That was it was a spill that had gone into storm drain across the highway. Mr. Wilper had responded at DEP's request, was on it. I'm not sure, I have to find the details. I don't know how DEP was alerted to that fact, but they responded accordingly and did the cleanup.
Now, recently I saw a memo saying that we no longer had access to that property. Is that on a temporary basis? Because normally we use that property to put signs, township signs, and I had gotten a request from the recreation department that since they didn't have use of that site, to be able to locate a sign on my property. So I didn't know if you knew anything about that.
No, I'll have to look into it and get back to you.
All right, I'm hoping that's just a temporary reason because of the work that the county was doing there. Okay, all right. We're on to old business. Anybody? New business. Legal matters.
I have nothing. I don't have any reports today.
No, well, you don't get paid today, no.
Okay.
Okay, as far as the recreation, obviously everybody knows the carnival's on its way. I've been getting a glimpse at some of the vendors that are going to be attending. It looks like it's going to be an exciting carnival. I think the taste in the air is palpable of all the residents that are wanting it back, especially since there's going to be a garden of sorts there. And baseball is winding down. Travel baseball is getting underway, and pretty soon we'll be talking football. Board of Health.
Yes, Mr. President, the only thing bringing the council up to date on is we had the first introduction for the ordinance on massage parlors, and that had a lot of comment from the board members. It had to be revised. Again, that was drafted up with through the police department. Not sure that we have issues, but I think the ordinance will go strong to help protect the operation and keep it sanitary and clean, so to speak.
I believe I know the issue as to why it had arisen, and I'm hoping that the ordinance coming out of that will address some of the issues that some residents have had regarding those establishments.
It most certainly will, Mr. President.
Legislative Committee?
Nothing today.
I had a chance, obviously our legislators are busy with the budget down in Trenton, as we well know. I do have, as I mentioned at the last meeting, Senator Arrojo looking in to find out from the Board of Public Utilities if the Affordable Housing Trust Fund can be construed to mean the same as the smart growth requirement under the Clean Energy Program that says that if they're a funded project, such as through HMFA, that they are entitled to receive incentives. So if Homeless Solutions does in fact build this thing and they build it to the Clean Energy Program, that given the fact that they down in Hackettstown they didn't receive any program incentives because they're not in the smart growth area. But if you use the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, is that considered? Because if CO was taking it, right, under the Council of Affordable Housing, isn't that kind of funding, such as HMFA would be providing funding, same as like tax credits? So we think that's kind of interesting. He's kind of reaching out to Lee Solomon and the president, and we're going to get an answer hopefully within the next week. So I would hope that by the time the Homeless Solutions does begin to move out, I'm sure that we won't have an issue as a council, the same as we've done with Habitat for Humanity, and tell them that they need to build energy efficiency into the home. But this may be something that helps to sweeten their pot a little bit, that says at least the cost of their upgrades, or a nice percentage of it, could be incensed back from the state under the Clean Energy Program. So I'll keep the council up to date on how they make out.
Thank you very much, Mr. Perkins. Mr. Walsh, Planning Board?
Nothing to report.
Board of Education?
Nothing tonight.
Mr. Ferrante, Open Space?
Nothing.
And Lake Environmental?
Nothing there, and nothing for the library. Everybody meets at the beginning of the month.
Thank you very much. Mr. Nicastro, Safety Committee?
Rescheduled.
Okay, and Economic?
Nothing to report.
Mr. Mania,
Nothing.
Senior Citizen? Nothing. Okay, and Pride, Ms. Labo?
We meet tomorrow night.
And TNR?
Nothing to report right now.
We're on to our last public portion. Is anyone from the public wish to be heard?
Back to the old story about necessary items and things that are nice to have. $50,000 for a sign, it seems like it's nice to have, but in this economic time, I don't see that it's necessary. And also, if you feel that it's that desirable or a nice-to-have item, you should find some other nice-to-have item that you can delete. Because I just don't see that we really need a new sign right now, even though it is nice to have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else from the public? Seeing none. Council comments. Mr. Perkins?
None.
Mr. Ferrante?
Just real quick, just want to congratulate the high school seniors for their graduation. I was there with a couple of councilmen, the mayor, and a really good time. I was pretty impressed with the numerous listing of accolades that have gone on. It sounded like it was one of their best graduating classes they've had in a while, so congratulations.
Yeah, it was definitely very regretful that I could not attend. Mr. Nicastro?
No comment.
Mr. Walsh?
Nothing.
Ms. Labo?
I just want to thank the administration for everything that they do and the well-thought-out plans. Everybody's just so incredibly thorough, and I really appreciate it, and the communication, just hearing everything and feeling free to ask questions. And because we were voting on the resolutions before, I didn't really get to really thank Sherry, and I want the public to know that having our audit is a very important process, and Sherry has been with the town 15 13, 12 years? 12 years and has brought us through our audit.
And has never taken a dime.
Yep,
okay?
100% doing a great job, and it's really phenomenal, and you've continued to keep our AAA rating, or you'll work towards that. You have a really great plan in place for bringing down our bond debt, and it's just amazing what you do, and I just didn't want to pass over the meeting without really thanking you sincerely from the bottom of my heart for all of the hard work that you do. It's greatly appreciated, Sherry. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Just before you close out, I think it would be appropriate for us as a group to offer condolences to the two families that lost their kids since our last council meeting. It was a horrific accident, and there's really nothing more that we can say than to really ease the pain that the families are feeling.
Very difficult.
And Sherry, I'd like to jump in and echo Ms. Laybell's comments. Having only served on the Mount Olive Council, I always hear that we are very fiscally responsible, and you take those comments with a grain of salt. But then having to read what other townships are having to do and what they're going through and their bond ratings, it highlights greatly how good of a job not only your staff but past administrations and councils have done. So again, kudos.
Mr. President?
I'd also like to at least, yes.
Can I add one accolade?
Sure.
I've in my recent memory here and elsewhere, have not seen any audits where there have been zero audit comments, and it's something that Sherry does year in and year out, and it's truly a credit to her because I haven't seen it elsewhere.
And I'd also like to commend the administration. I do recognize that much effort goes into deciding our, and in this particular instance, our COA obligations. So please don't take my remarks as any indication that you took your tasks in your job without that in mind. I do recognize how difficult it is, and I'm pretty sure 102% of people in the same shoes would have probably come up with the same decision. And with that, I'd like to take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Oh, my God. Wow.
You got one in.
It's been seconded and moved. All in favor?
Aye.